Okay, folks, it's 7 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. And you have an opportunity to look at the agenda. You had it for a few days. Anybody care to make a motion? Moved by Councillor Butcher to approve the agenda, seconded by Deputy Mayor Aiken. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. Just before we jump to the question period, I'd like to say a couple of words in my role as chair here. I think that in the last little while there's been a lot of concern about the tone of public discourse elsewhere in particular, and it made me reflect on what role I have here as the chair and the dangers of that seeping into our activities here. And I've been particularly thinking about some of the concerns leveled at our staff on several fronts in the past. And in my view, we're very fortunate to have staff that are qualified, professional, and dedicated as we do. And they're working to enhance our community. So that type of an approach is just not acceptable to me. So I want to clarify that from here on, I do not want to have to put up with tolerating any abusive type of a question about or disrespectful behavior about our staff. So I would like people to understand that I expect all comments and questions will be posed in a respectful manner, and that all participants take responsibility for their words and actions. That includes us. The town will continue, as it always has, to address any inquiries we receive, but those that are received in an abusive manner, we will not attend to. Of course, members of the community have every right and even a responsibility to ask us questions of their elected officials, and it remains our responsibility to respond to all of them. These are tenets of our democracy, which I believe council will always defend, but that discourse should take place in a manner that reflects the importance of our system. One other point is that I believe some discourse that is out there is being fueled by inaccuracies on topics. And so I am going to include in my mayor's report a reference to evidence if we are hearing that there is a lot of inaccuracies floating around a topic or two. I think we have an obligation to get the evidence that we are basing our decisions on clearly stated to the community. So I'll add that as appropriate when a topic arises in my mayor's report. So thank you for that opportunity, and we are open to question period. Any questions from the audience?
Hi, I have two questions. Wendy Alder. The first question I have is, during Sackville Fest, Bridge Street was closed for 3.5 days. There was a detour sign at the end of Allison Avenue for anyone that came through town, through the town lights on Main Street, and couldn't turn left onto Bridge. However, there was no signage posted for anyone traveling towards town advising the Bridge Street was closed, and therefore all traffic was directed out Main Street to exit 504. As you know, Queens Road to Main Street to Bridge is 106. This is a busy time of year with tourist traffic who are following the Fundy Coastal Drive if they're coming from Dorchester. They were detoured to exit 506. So they would have normally come down here, gone down Bridge, but there was no sign saying follow 106, go up Allison Avenue and back towards Bridge Street. So my question is, why was there no signage at the end of Allison Avenue advising the Bridge Street was closed and that there was a detour?
So that's if somebody was coming this way, there was no signage and they just carried through and didn't go down the other way.
Like I had customers that couldn't get to, didn't realize the Bridge Street was closed until I got to Bridge Street, went out to 504 and then realized that it was closed, so went down the highway obviously to come to us. But if you're from out of town, it cuts us off completely, that whole end of town. No,
fair question. Mr. Acton, do you know what the signage was?
Yeah, I can speak on that. I actually had a visit from Doug Olton, who raised the same point. I believe it was on Friday. He came into the office, and it indicated we'd look at that to see if that was something that could be addressed. Fortunately, we didn't have the appropriate sign to say Detour 106. So I spoke to Todd Hicks, and we we said that for future detours that we should try to make up appropriate signs to do that. But as far as the detour goes, anybody coming along 106, they'd get to Bridge Street and they would see the sign that says detour back towards Allison. Hopefully they would have turned around and then headed back to Allison, and then the detour sign would take them up over Allison, down to Lauren, and back onto 106.
But your point is it would be better to have
I
a sign.
I agree with Mr. Olton, who talked to me about it. We just didn't have the appropriate signs to do that at that point in time. But for future years, it's something that we would look to try to a detour sign that says Detour 106, take them up over before they get to Bridge Street.
Okay.
So at least they can see that.
Sorry about that, but thanks for raising it, and we
Okay, so
won't
it's
make that happen again.
And August 24th and 25th during my understanding anyway, is during the Talk Festival. Bridge Street gets closed down again.
Yeah.
So can we make sure signage is?
Do our best to get the right 106 sign, yes.
Okay. The other question is just about, I wasn't able to make the discussion meeting, but listened to some of the conversation around the 506 work that's going to be done. And I'm just wondering, so we're talking about sidewalks. I believe, from my understanding, there'll be like a formal sidewalk in front of the daycare, and curbing, so I'm assuming they'll have to have an entrance and an exit, which, I mean, they have it marked anyways, but I'm assuming the curbing will allow for that. But I'm wondering about, there's been no mention of any crosswalks, which I know I'm assuming there's not much cost to doing a crosswalk, but I'm just wondering if there's any plan to have crosswalks out there as well, which would get from the sidewalk that would end on Bridge or potentially go partway around Cattail, depending on, I know in Dwayne's comments at the discussion meeting, there was just talk about the curb that doesn't align properly. So depending on how far it goes, to get the kids across, again, Bridge Street to the industrial park, or across Cattail Ridge to continue down Bridge Street to where the old bridge train is, or the old bridge is, I guess, that doesn't
Okay,
exist.
so the question is whether that plan includes crosswalks before we do the final investments on the capital next year or the year after. Are there any crosswalks in the plan for this year?
I can again talk on that. There's been discussion on it. The difficulty is there's no sidewalk on the other side of Cattail Ridge. So we have to be careful about where we would put a curb cut in order to put a crosswalk to be able to take the pedestrians. And that's part of the problem. But we will be looking at that as part of this project, and there will be a decision made as to where the crosswalk would go. We have to keep in mind of the future improvements to the area and the future plans to that, so that we're putting the curb cut in an area that we're not going to have to backtrack in a year's time and redo that crosswalk. But it will be looked at. If it's not incorporated this year, then when the final plans are done for future developments there, it would definitely incorporate the crosswalk.
So it's on the radar.
Okay, so I know, last year when they did the crosswalk study last year or the year before, you talked exactly about that, not having sidewalks across the street and stuff, and therefore not, at the time, not being able to do a crosswalk because there was no sidewalk across the street. But I guess I just want to reiterate, which I've said a couple times here to council, that there's a lot of kids out there. There's like over 120 kids, I think, in that daycare, and they do make regular trips to the recycle. I'm not a shareholder in the daycare at all anymore, but just, I know there are a group of kids and parents, and they do take, for example, recycles by wagon out to the recycle place, and they've been out on cleanup day. They were, again, out in the industrial park picking up garbage from the blueberry thing, or the cranberry thing, garbage that was all around there. So I think, whether there's sidewalks or not, just for the interests of safety for that area, for residents and for the kids, maybe we should consider crosswalks, even if there are no sidewalks on the other side. Thank you.
Okay, definitely take that in. Any other questions?
Mayor, Council, I'm Sharon Hicks. I've got 3 questions. First one, from page 22 in the agenda package. It's a line item under the Recreation and Parks Facilities report under expenses. For the playground equipment, this is for Littlest Faucet Park. It says the budget was, with tax included, $15,000. Then it breaks down pre-tax by amount and HST portion. The expenses, pre-HT, was $72,508.89. The balance is negative $58,125.92, which is 404.1% deficit. So my question is, can you clarify the figures? That deficit of 404%, is that the grant money, which will be coming later?
I was going to ask that question too when it arose.
Asked it last month.
Is that Mr. Pride or Mr. Cole? Oh, you guys switched microphones again.
Sorry about that. Yes, Sharon, it is
Okay.
almost exclusively grant money that hasn't come through yet. We have to make claims to receive the funding, and we've received some of it, but not all of it yet.
Okay, so when that grant money comes in, will that cover the full deficit of over $58,000?
It should, yes.
Okay, it
There might be a small difference there, but it should cover the vast majority of it, if not all of it, yeah.
Okay, if it doesn't cover the whole amount, where would the rest of the money come from?
Mr. Beal, would you?
Yeah, once all the grant money comes in, yes, it will be within budget. But on this spreadsheet that you see in the council report, every month it will be over by 404%. What happens, you see on the left of that spreadsheet, for that item, there's a C/G, which means capital out of revenue / grant money. This comes out of our capital budget. Everything we spend capital related comes out of our capital budget, so this spreadsheet is generated through there. And where the money comes in from the grants comes in our general operating budget. So at the end of the year, when we reconcile the money that comes in from the grant, we charge back the capital out of revenue to that. And so there's an equal revenue and an equal expense that offsets any grant money that comes in. And when the project was approved, it was within budget after the grant money was received.
Okay, that's good. I hope that was the explanation. Okay, question 2. In the engineer's report, page 31 of the package, the subject about the crosswalk on Academy Stretch there at the university, the report said a crosswalk evaluation looked at lighting, pedestrian safety, motorists using the street, etc. Various options were considered. Recommendations were presented to council last week to install a specific type of traffic light system at that crosswalk. Some councillors at the time questioned the need for it, and they also questioned whether it would work. Now, that crosswalk has been studied numerous times in the past. The latest one was in 2006 by Michael Fox from Mount A. The conclusion of those previous studies, from what I can see, indicate that any type of traffic light system at that crosswalk would create more problems than it would solve for a variety of different reasons that were stated. My questions is two-part. Were those previous studies considered during the process for determining that we would need this crossing light system?
I'll answer that. 2006 was a student project. I recall that. So somebody asked how much we paid. We paid $0 for it. It was a student project. And it was provided to council, and council did accept the recommendations in 2006 and did pursue many of them with Mount Allison University, none of which was agreed to. But the point I think that's most important is since 2006, there's been about $100 million invested in capital infrastructure on campus by the university, and it has drastically changed the location of the food services, which has drastically changed the amount of students and or traffic across that particular crosswalk. So the 2006 was good at that time, but now 13 years later, there's a different context, and that's what we're looking at, is the evidence of what we have now, and that's significantly different than in 2006.
is the answer to my second question, like, why now is this suddenly coming up as an important issue? So I guess I can live with that for now. My third question, final one, since the 1st of August, as council's aware, because I've been forwarding articles to them, there's been numerous articles in New Brunswick newspapers, mainly the Moncton Times, St. John Telegraph, and also the Fredericton Daily Gleaner, about a disproportionately high number of closed town council meetings, cities and towns throughout the province. It's very widespread, apparently. In some cases, for those who have not been following it, last year in 2018, for some jurisdictions had over half of all of their council meetings were held in secret. It has been deemed by the investigative journalists who are following this issue. They said the trend is widespread, it's unsatisfactory, hinders democratic process. So while there are some reasons for secret meetings, what they're stating is that it appears some councils are using ambiguous reasons as an excuse to exclude the public from some of their decision making. My question is, given all of that recent coverage, which is very thought-provoking, can we get a resolution from our own Sackville Council to, one, review their own practices in this regard, and two, make a concerted effort to reduce the number of in-camera meetings? It's a chance for Sackville to take a proactive role and set a good example for the rest of the province. Instead of following a trend, you could create a trend. So that's my question. Can we get a resolution in that
Well,
regard?
the short answer will be yes. We try to limit that, and I think that all of the articles have suggested, and we've asked staff to look at what those criteria are. Ultimately, the question to go in camera is council's decision, and council makes those decisions. I'm going to speak a little bit about that later on tonight, about some of the context of that, because the use of the word secret is incorrect. There is no secret meetings. There are actual legal context of every meeting that the council has, and I'll explain that to those who don't understand that, including the journalist who may be using that term. So it is not, we want to clarify some of the evidence about what the in-camera meetings are and what are public meetings, and also that we have a look at staff of coming back with some indication if there are some issues or whether we should be looking at certain changes to that policy. It is always council's decision on how that'll be implemented.
I realize that. I've also read through the description of the reasons for holding some or for having some items covered in camera. Some of the wording tends to be a little bit ambiguous, which could be interpreted various ways.
Right, and that's one of the things.
Perhaps that might be what's happening.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things we want to be clear. Are we
Yeah.
all interpreting it the same way or not?
Okay.
So,
Okay,
no.
good, thank you.
Any other questions, please? No, no. No, we'll get to, I'm going to speak to it again later. Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to disclosure of interest. I know one of the staff have identified a potential view of a potential conflict, and they'll be stepping out for that topic once again. Are there any other disclosures of interest from anyone? No? Okay. So we move to minutes, regular meeting of July 8th, on page 3 of your package. Councillor O'Neill, please.
Disclosure of interest when the Renaissance report is given.
Okay, so thank you for that. Okay, so now we move to regular council meeting of July 8th on page 3 of your package.
I move to be adopted as circulated.
Okay, moved by Councillor Evans, seconded by Councillor Black. I would like to make one clarification on page 4. It reads that resident Wendy Alder provided a history on the AVGP Cougar and asked why council agreed to have concerned residents present their concerns and halt installation of the Cougar. My recollection was that Ms. Alder said that as council had changed their mind on the Cougar, did this not set a precedent for future decisions of council to come under such similar concerns? And I responded to that. So that would be my recollection. If people also recall that, I would ask that that be amended. Please.
So what was your comment that you just said?
I said, what's in here said that you provided a history of the Cougar and asked why council agreed to have concerned residents present their concerns and halt installation of the Cougar.
Right.
My recollection was that you said that when council changed their mind on the gift of the Cougar,
No.
because that's what I responded to.
No, my question had been exactly this. So I had done I actually have it all typed out, I could send it to you, but I had asked, I said, my understanding was this was what happened, that I understood that there was no, council didn't say they didn't want the Cougar, it was the Hussars that had reneged on it, but I went through the history of, okay, I understand this is what happened, that they had gone to install it, and then there were some citizens that were concerned about that, and therefore it was halted at that point. And I asked specifically, was it a halt of the location? My concern was if you were stopping installation of something that was agreed to, were you going to set precedent that if a decision had already been made in the past,
Right.
then people would think, I can come to council and go because a decision was already made. But
So you would be more comfortable if you provided a history and asked, how did you just say that? A council intervened during installation, whether that set a precedent for intervening on other decisions it made?
Because the motion had already been passed to accept the gift and to install it in the park.
So is that better wording? Because that's what I recall is that we talked about, would it set a precedent? Said, well, no, the council did not change its motion and did not change its position. It just delayed installation to hear people.
Yeah, but my question was more on setting the precedent of allowing people to come and talk after a decision was already made. Not that, I knew that you weren't reneging on the gift, like that decision wasn't being made, but it was because that decision was made to stop installation, does that open it up for the future to have more people come, even though a decision's already made?
Okay.
I don't know how to put that in.
All right. Okay, so you're feeling that is accurate and that we should probably leave that as it is and reflects what you believe that we discussed?
Yeah,
Oh.
because it wasn't anything about the decision for the council to stop or like to change the motion or anything.
Okay. My recollection was that I said, well, we didn't change it and the Hussars changed the context, so.
And then there was more discussion and more questions
Right.
about that, but I can actually send you my question.
That's okay. I just want to be clear. I'm glad you're here, that we get this. So I will withdraw my request for an amendment based upon the clarification. So we have a motion on the floor, open for debate. Question? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Alder. And special meeting on August 6th on page 12 of your package. Moved by Councillor Tower. Seconded by Councillor Evans. Question? Oh, sorry, Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Worship. I've made some notes here, so please bear with me because I want to make sure I have my thoughts straight on this. Under the approval of the agenda in regards to the motion, there was discussion that happened there, and that's not in the minutes. And it was explained previously to council. I'd asked the question about detail in minutes, and that the municipality is following what is outlined in the Local Governance Act, which indicates the powers of the clerk in regards to attending all the meetings and recording in a book or electronically, and goes into details there. Where the meetings are recorded now. It does allow some compromise regarding the detail and the minutes being taken, as at any time the public or members of the council can review the recordings to hear the discussion, questions, and answers. Back in May, things changed regards to how we begin our meetings, if there was business to be conducted as part of the meeting in camera, that a single motion both approving the agenda and moving in, to in-camera was accepted under the Act. So that being the case, recordings aren't happening because normally we go right into camera. So when the meeting was open publicly at 5:30 on August 6th, the motion was called for the approval of the agenda and move in camera, but not noted in the minutes, and there's no recording to refer to. There was a request of council to consider moving file numbers PA 2019-01 and PA 2019-02 from in-camera to the open meeting. Yourself and this AO reviewed how these files were considered and how they qualified for in-camera discussion, as the subject matter was referred to as third-party agreements. There was also discussion around the use of the file numbers noted in the agenda. There was an explanation provided as to why file numbers were used instead of subject matter due to privacy concerns. So where there's no recording of that part of the meeting, which was not in camera, I'd like to request that the minutes for the August 6th special council meeting reflect the additional information.
Thank you, Councillor Michaud. I think you've summarized quite well where we are now, because as you said, in response to some questions from the community, we had adjusted our process to be more consistent with what they had suggested, which was to have it in camera open and then go into camera and then come back out. And I believe that what we're finding is we're now trying to figure out exactly what some of those administrative details go along with that. And I think that the question is a valid one. We are in a public forum at that point as you speak. We do not tape it as far as I know, because we have some, I think, some technical issues about being able to tape it and then start again an hour later, which has to be, we're looking into to see what we can do about that. So I will make a commitment that we are looking into both the administrative question that Councillor Michaud has and the technical question, so that we can be sure we can capture any of those minutes on the audio as well. Are there any concerns with that with the CAO or clerk, or? Okay.
So is it possible then to have that information added where there was no recording to the minutes then for August 6th? That's, I guess that's the...
Okay,
Yeah.
that's on the floor. Councillor Evans, please.
Yeah, this is what I was hoping to say earlier, so I'll take this opportunity now. I want the public to know is that every time we go in camera, we decide whether it's appropriate or not. And we've had this discussion on many occasions, and there have been times when we've said, I don't think this needs to be in camera. And so this is not us doing something to be secret. We have an obligation under our TIPA and a lot of other legal reasons to do stuff in camera. And so I was one, there were several of us who asked the question, why are some of these being done in camera? We got an answer which was satisfactory to me. That's why I voted in favor of leaving it. But those discussions do happen. When it comes to taking minutes, there are reasons. Some people take very verbose minutes. Most people advise you should only minute motions. And when you have a motion that is not seconded, regularly you do not minute that, because nothing officially happened. And it's frustrating, especially if you give what you think is an eloquent speech. We don't record the details of that. So I think we're still working at this. I really like what we're doing now. We used to have very verbose minutes, which was useful to an old forgetful guy, but it's a problem because they say, well, how can they put in what Sean said, not what I said? So now we're sticking to the basics, and I think we're doing a pretty good job, but I agree, let's make sure we do it right.
So I think the point Councillor Michaud's is that's an open portion. We should reflect it in the minutes in the similar way as we reflect in the rest of the minutes. And so we'd ask staff to look at that implication. And Mr. Michaud, I presume you're asking to hold the minutes until that wording is known. So your suggestion is?
I think it needs more, but it's definitely a discussion. I think that's important for the public to understand because we are talking about this. It has been in the media, and I think it's important to understand the process that was used. And I just want to clarify that when a motion is made, even though it's not seconded, yes, it doesn't go to the floor for a vote, but it still does get recorded. I've had that happen previously in my last term, and it was noted that it does.
Okay, so in terms of the minutes that we have before us, there's two options. One is that you accept it with an amendment, which we do not have, or you defer approval. Well, we can't defer approval with a motion on the table. Can't bring it back? I don't know.
Table until the next meeting.
Table?
Table till time certain.
Okay. Okay, moved by CAO. You want to comment on the table?
I'm sorry, Your Worship, the table was what?
Table the minutes till next meeting.
Oh, okay.
So that this portion would be clear in what the record will look like.
Okay, yes, if I could then, I mean, in terms of what's been said, the recording in that, as was explained, as the mayor explained, yes, we changed and have tried to be more, it's been described to me as being pristine in terms of our process, and we have tried to work towards that. The recording is something we will do. In the past, typically, it's been a 15-second type deal, a motion approval, and we were into the in-camera. So I don't think we were ready for that as staff. We'll look to try and address that administratively. I did speak to the treasurer. There are challenges with the equipment that we have to be able to go into in-camera, then pause, if you will, and expect that it's going to be there. That's going to be a problem, but we'll take a look at that. The concern I have around the comments that Councillor Michaud mentioned, we have discussed internally, but there was no motion made by yourself to do anything other than what the motion that was to approve to go in camera, accept the agenda and to go in camera. You raised it as a discussion point. There was a discussion with lots of opinions around what people thought, but there was not a motion. If there had been a motion, that would have been, even if there isn't a seconder, I agree, it still would have made it to the minutes, but there was no motion to amend. It was a discussion. And I believe, as was pointed out in an email to yourself and to other members of council, the Local Governance Act says it's purely the matter of the decision and so on, and we stay away from providing notes and comments on such matters. And when we do, as you've seen tonight from resident members asking questions and responses, it's incredibly difficult to get that accurate. And people sometimes think, this is what I said, no, that's what I meant. And staff's left trying to interpret exactly that. We don't speak the Queen's English when we all speak. There's some body language comes into it. Extremely difficult sometimes to get the interpretation exact. I think that leads to, or has led to, why governments have said, state the matter, what's the decision, the vote, that's the record. So comments to bring that into a future meeting, I think, is difficult, especially retroactively, because you think you're dependent now on people's memories of what was ever said, and I wouldn't suggest for a minute that many of us could do that.
Okay, and on the concept of tabling them.
There's no problem tabling. I guess it's exactly what is it you want us to do. I don't think we can bring forward comments that would satisfy people to be accurate.
So if we table for staff to, because what I had said earlier was consistent with the way in which we've been doing the minutes so far, whether there would be an additional change to it or not, plus an update on some of the issues we have administratively to carry this forward. We would table it on the basis of you supplying, the staff supplying what they believe to be the correct text, and also the initial phase of how we might be able to adjust our processes to catch this. Is that good? That good? Councilor Michaud, you have a supplemental?
Yeah, just as I was indicating, My concern isn't necessarily over the minutes themselves and how they're done. Is the fact that there is a recording. If we ever want to understand the questions that were asked and the answers given, there is a recording that will help us understand what happens. In this case, there wasn't. So that's all I'm indicating, is the fact that where there wasn't a recording, then is it possible to have that included and go from, that's where my concern is.
Tabled for those two purposes.
Yeah.
Look at whether there was any change to the minutes being under our present system, and two, what is the technical questions that we can do to address that. Okay? So the question now is a motion to table the minutes by Councillor Michaud till the next meeting, seconded by Councillor Tower. Question on that? Question. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, so tabled. Business arising from the minutes, there, any other than, anything that anybody saw? No? Hearing none. Southeast Regional Services Commission, Mayor Hyams, Ron, Deputy Mayor, we did not have any meetings to report on for the Regional Service Commission from last month, right? Thank you. So we do not have any, and we will move to Ms. Bickford.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the month of July, there were 6 permits issued for the town of Sackville. This brings our year-to-date total to 43, with a total construction value of $4.9 million. This is up in the number of permits that were issued from last year, but down in construction value. And as I like to remind everybody, last year was a very good construction value year with the large commercial projects and industrial projects that we had underway. During the July 24th meeting of the Southeast Regional Service Commission, the Southeast Planning Review and Adjustment Committee meeting, the committee did review one application for the town of Sackville, and that was to recommend the sale of a portion of lands for public purposes off of Samantha Court. Portion of that property would still remain as LPP, just for future use. Other projects that were worked on during the month, I did attend the Canadian Institute of Planners National Conference. This did mark 100 years of planning in Canada, so it was a great anniversary to celebrate during the session. We've also looked at land for public purposes connectivity, so this is kind of doing a overview of the town, looking at the lands for public purposes that are currently in the town's possession, and then looking at, is there future points that the town should be looking at connecting. Through that subdivision process, if you recall, town has the option to take land or cash in lieu. Any cash in lieu that's taken during that process is required to be paid into a special account for the purchase. So those are kind of things that we're looking at that overall scheme of things, and if there's certain spots that we want to connect. The other item that we have on is the third reading for the text amendment for the introduction of micro-cannabis facilities in the town. So as you recall, this bylaw proposes to amend the definition of agriculture to remove reference to controlled substances not being an agricultural use. And then it would see the introduction of definitions of micro-cultivation facilities as well as standard cultivation facilities. And then the final part of that bylaw would be to allow micro-cultivation within the agriculture conservation zone, as well as allow micro and standard cultivation facilities within the industrial zone. So again, the standard facilities, those are those large-scale, more industrial-looking ones, are still required to go into the industrial park as they currently are now. If there's any questions?
Any questions on the report? Councillor Evans, please.
Just to clarify, the PRAC decision or recommendation, I guess it's a decision, isn't it? Just so I understand, we had some land designated for public purposes, and we are selling part of it, which the subdivision actually adds to someone else's property, and it's what's left is still large enough to be good for lands for public purpose, right? It sounds like it here is that it says the property that we're selling is still big enough. The part that we have left is still, am I reading it correctly?
I would have to re-examine the wording, but no, that's not what's intended. The first part is this isn't a decision of the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee. They are just saying they're consenting to. It's a requirement under the act that before a municipality can sell a portion or sell all of the land for public purposes, they have to ask for the consent of the committee. At the end of the day, it's still the council's decision as to whether they're gonna sell the portion or not.
Oh, yes.
The second part of that is that they're referencing their reason for consenting to the sale of the portion is that the remainder of the property, which is what you will be keeping as LPP, still meets the minimum size requirements and still allows for the opportunity to fulfill that intended purpose.
Great, that's what I thought. Thank you for confirming.
Any other questions on the report? Is it just a coincidence that the Canadian Institute of Planners has the 100th year anniversary as same year as the CN does?
Perhaps.
All right. No other questions? Oh, Councillor Michaud, sorry.
Worship, just for clarification, I know we keep talking about last year permits and dollar value. So if we're gonna go back, let's say 2017, like, are we looking at an average year for permits and value? Is this kind of on par, or are we kind of below or up? Or?
It certainly is very difficult to do comparison year by year. I would say this year is more representative of a typical year versus last year was exceptionally, we had some really big projects that you tend to don't have that many happening in one year, so.
No other questions? I believe you have a motion. Councillor Black, are you taking that?
I move that council give third and final reading to bylaw number 244H, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 244, Town of Sackville zoning bylaw.
Moved by Councillor Black, seconded by, sorry, I didn't catch it, was it Councillor Tower? Seconded by Councillor Tower. Councillor Evans, please.
On the motion, I would like to state for the record that I am not a fan of cannabis. However, I don't believe that this personal opinion is relevant to the execution of my responsibilities as a councillor. I'm voting in favor of this motion for the reasons that I gave last month. We are simply amending our bylaw to reflect changes in federal legislation. My support for this motion doesn't reflect support for nor opposition to the production or consumption of cannabis, but simply a recognition of the fact that both activities are now legal.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Any other comments? Question? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Nay. One nay from Councillor Finney. Thank you. Motion is carried. That moves us on to Mayor's report. Sorry about this, but I did not copy it. Wrote it too late. So under media, I will report that Canadian Press contacted us in follow-up on the announcement of the Dykes study funding and the call for proposals. Amherst News followed up on that particular one about what the local town views would be upon that Dykes study announcement. Attended the Sandpiper Festival and also at the Shad students, went to both their business pitch afternoon and also to their final reception, where we also had an opportunity to thank them for coming and to suggest they consider coming back here as they enter university years. Under community-supported education, there was a COA press release and a press conference held in this room about a week or so ago to indicate that COA had formally provided some money for the community-supported route. The community coordinator position is just closed on Friday, and they have numerous applicants. The research intern who was working with me over the summer on the value or the economic impact of education and somewhat into knowledge finished her final report, and I will send that off to you. I only got it recently, but in essence, it talks about roughly somewhere between 147 million to 161, 62 million per year in economic impacts from the formal education system in this town. So those are the benefits to the economy of the town, which is a significant amount of money. And I'm already told by some at the Mount A that it undervalues some of their funding, and they would like to have an opportunity to speak to that report at some point. But if anything is being criticized for being undervalued, so take the higher end of $160 million a year as the economic impact of Mount Allison and the 3 schools to the town of Sackville, not to the region, but to the town of Sackville. We hosted a meeting on the potential for a railway flooding pilot here in this room, and UMNB chaired that meeting, and we had DTI, CN, and the MP's office attend that to discuss the potential of that moving forward, and we're waiting for UMNB to decide what their next step might be. Met Community Forests International on a couple of fronts. We'll be talking about that over the next little while. I think we'll bring that up as those topics arrive. But Community Forests International works internationally. They are residents here in Sackville. Most of us don't know what they do, and they want to rectify that and become more involved in the local town as well. Had some very in-depth conversations with the Nature Conservancy of Canada. And there should be some announcements on a couple of items that they're involved with that they wanted to give me a heads up, that there are some things coming soon that we should keep aware of. And they were very complimentary about how this town addresses habitats and environmental matters of interest to them. What about miscellaneous Mount A orientation? Mayor's welcome once again. On the UMNB Protection Committee, they were asked to provide a presentation to WorkSafe NB, and we flipped through and provided some input to that based upon our experience. I would note that I was talking to the Enterprise Place, which, as you may now know, is the Culligan Water home, and it's done its renovations, is up and running, and we had a good little chat about what their plans were, and it made me think about whether, with all the activities, with people moving around, there's only one storefront that I can think of that is vacant right now in the York, Bridge, Maine, Lorne areas that are typically retail. So that's a pretty good sign to what's going on. We had an inquiry from people about what our small homes rules were. They like the town, but they feel they need a smaller home and wondered what the regulatory rules were. And Mr. Burke and Ms. Pickford both, I think, got referrals off of that. I've had multiple retirement inquiries still again, as we know, a lot of people are getting them, particularly landlords, but I got a couple from Quebec and a couple from Ontario this last month, inquiring about why should I move there. It sounds good, so that continues. And that's pretty well it. Any questions on that elements of my my report? Sorry for not circulating in advance. Councillor Michaud?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure if this is the right time. I know it's not regarding your report, but I know that you and the Deputy Mayor have provided information and done presentations in the past, and where we have some UMMB resolutions coming forward tonight. I'm curious, I was checking back on presentations, and February 4th, the Deputy Mayor had made a presentation on equalization grant, and the minutes indicated that that the Deputy Mayor will continue to work on the options to address the issue and bring findings back to Council. And I'm just wondering where things currently sit with that, if it's moving forward, what the next steps are, because I know there have been some discussion around the resolution at the special council meeting, and just on the formulation and how that happens and what's included. So I just want to know where that is before we get to those.
So specifically to the question of the students being counted in equalization?
Well, yeah, it's just the grant itself, and I know that came in. I know that was part of the Deputy Mayor's presentation, so I'm just kind of wondering where things are in that, so.
Okay, that's a good point. Deputy Mayor, would you like to bring us up to date?
Thank you, Worship. Letters have gone out to 9 municipalities requesting, at this point, a letter of support for us to go to Fredericton to meet with who we have to meet with to try and sort this out. And I'm currently awaiting replies from these people.
If we do not hear, will we be following up with UMNB or at UMNB conference?
And for the record, the communities are Dieppe, Moncton, Shippagan, Edmundston, Woodstock, St. Andrews, Miramichi, St. John, and I've probably forgotten one, but
Everywhere there is a college or a university, right?
yeah, any part of the UNB, of the New Brunswick Community College system, or a university or campus of a university.
So that's where we're at. Councillor Evans? Oh, sorry,
Not-
Councillor Michaud, you have a follow-up?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, sorry.
No problem.
I guess, just in regards to timeline, so there's been no response whatsoever, and they've had this in their possession for how long? And I'm just kind of curious as to the timeline here, because.
Deputy Mayor, please.
We just sent the letters out recently, so we'll give them a month or so. I think council has to be reminded this is going to be a long process. It's not, people have to be convinced, and that will take a while.
Okay, Councillor Evans, you still?
Yeah, I think I remember too. And I'm not piling on because your report was not written, but I made some notes, but these railway flooding pilot, who were the players? Like, who was here? It was hosted here? Who was there? Was CN here? Was it?
Yes.
FCM?
No.
Did you say? UMNB?
No, this was our idea that we had floated through at FCM and indicated at FCM, CN said they would participate, and UMNB said, yes, that's a good idea, we should lead that. And DTI responded favorably, and the MP's office responded favorably to our request that they attend. So it's what I felt was good. We physically hosted it and introduced it. UMNB took the chair and took ownership from there on. So it was seen as a potential regional pilot that may have a national implication as well.
So CN, DTI were all at the table?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Hearing no other questions, I would like to talk to, I said about making sure that we have some facts about things. So I want to talk about authorities and procedures of council. And some comments on town activities appear to be based on misconceptions of some of the fundamental principles underlying local governments in this province. Local governments are totally a creation of provincial governments. It's only when a province creates a legal framework for local government can one exist. We are completely at the behest of a provincial government in this province. NB framework is mostly found within the Local Governance Act, where its legal status, purpose, powers are all detailed. Where there seems to be most confusion is in where local government authority rests and how it's discharged. So I'm going to focus on those two particular areas. So typically in a local government, there are two approaches that decide which authorities rest and how they'll go. They call it a strong mayor approach, where a lot of authority and decision-making power rests within the mayor's office. And then there is the weak mayor approach, where all the authority is vested in council. We have weak mayor approaches. There is no authority vested with the mayor. All authority is vested in council as a whole. So that's where we are. The mayor basically chairs meetings, only participates if there's a tie vote on council, and must abide by everything council says, unlike a strong mayor approach, but that is what we have. So it's important to understand one fundamental principle of this. While all of us are individually elected, nobody has any authority vested in them alone. Mayor doesn't, neither does any councillor whatsoever. According to the Act and to the Guide, each councillor is mandated to consider the best interests of the whole community in each and every matter they address. So while individuals are elected, that is their mandate to look at the best interests of everybody in the community, and then council has the authority to exercise that. So not only is all authority exercised by council as a whole, it can only exercise it within a duly convened meeting as prescribed under the Act. In other words, every decision of council must be made by a proper quorum of council in a properly arranged, properly administered, and properly recorded meeting. If not, there is no decision. This public accountability of council is central to local government across the Western world, but particularly here in this province. So in order to ensure that that legal mandate that the council has, various councils will, over the years, create supporting structures to that. So, because no councillor has any authority to direct any staff or to ask for any particular information by themselves, the council has passed the CAO bylaw, which mandates that council's employee that they deal with is the CAO, who is responsible for dealing with the staff. We have liaison councils. That liaison is exactly that, a liaison. There is no decision-making. There is no discussion over what council's views will be. It is an exchange of a political-oriented and best interest of the community-oriented view and the technical staff level, so that hopefully the products that come forward will be better by having both sides viewed, but there is no decision-making in that area. Council meeting dates are published and posted a year in advance, so the public knows when they are and where they're going to be. Council meeting dates are also supplemented by agendas and materials, which are completed by Thursday afternoon and publicly posted that Thursday afternoon, which is when we get them. So the public gets the same information as what council gets at the same time. So we try very hard to not adjust that materials, although occasionally we have material that is late breaking and we have to add that into our packages, usually waiting until the Monday that it comes up and making sure there are copies available for everybody to get at the same time. Once approved, of course, meeting minutes are fully available. So just a quick reminder here that there are no secret meetings of this council. You can only have meetings as defined under the Act, and they're either a regular meeting or where you have a discussion, or a regular meeting, or it's an in-camera meeting with specific criteria attached to that. All decisions, no decision can be made in any meeting except a public meeting. There is no staff or authority for making any decisions, and no individual has the authority to make any decisions in this local government. So we have implemented a framework of bylaws, policies, procedures, and practices to ensure consistency in meeting all of these. And that is where we often find that we may individually interpret those differently. And unfortunately, interpreting that tends to fall to the mayor, interpreting what council's decisions in all of those areas and what their meanings are falls to the mayor, because the mayor must abide by council. So that's when I'm asked often to clarify, what do you think this means based upon all of that framework that council has around all that. So I think it's important that, that we just discussed that. I think it's important that people understand how authority rests in council as a whole at duly convened meetings. There is no other authority whatsoever to be exercised by any individuals or by council outside of that. It's a fundamental, many people who look at this political science say this is the fundamental tenet of democracy. This is the most purest form of democracy we see out there, which is your elected representatives have to come to consensus in a public forum and justify their every decision they make. So that is simply an information meet from myself. I hope to follow up when I hear that there may be other issues that people are unclear of and why we do certain things or how we arrive at certain things. So I hope not to have to do that very often, but we may have to. So I don't know, Council, have you any questions or comments on my piece here?
I have a comment. Here.
Okay. Okay. So that's it for the mayor's report, and over to the CAO, please, for item number AB.
Thank you, Worship. My report's on page 17, and basically just references the past month. It's been once again another busy month of programs and services that typically occur within the various departments. And you'll also note when the reports are presented that there's references and plans towards upcoming activities as well, such as the bridge that's being planned to connect to the waterfowl and the Lund property with the generous donation by the Rotary Club. Officially or unofficially, I'm not sure, but I think there's references to it as being the Rotary Bridge. Whether that's the name of it or future name of it, I'm not sure. But anyways, that's how it's being referenced by some,
People will expect it to be a
including
circle.
myself.
People will expect it to look like a circle.
Could be. There's also a comment in there of an upcoming after-hours business event, which certainly encourage our businesses to come out to, and corporate services may offer more on that when the report's presented. As comments noted in the finance report as well, that things are on track for 2019 again, and as we heard tonight, until the year closes, there is some adjusting that happens from different accounts once grants come in, et cetera, but it's looking good, so that's positive, but we still have 5 months ahead of us yet. But we've reached that time in the year, even though we're only roughly halfway through 1 year, we're now starting to plan and prepare for next year's. The 2020 budget process will be discussed a little bit further in detail in September, at least the schedule, so the public will be aware of when our meetings are. And you'll also note and see throughout the department reports that there are a number of motions coming forward tonight in terms of operations and projects and tenders and things that were, noted as within our plan and financed through the budget process as well. And so with that, Your Worship, if there's any questions or concerns, I'd do my best to try and answer it.
Questions on the CAO report? Hearing none, I will move to Finance and Admin. Deputy Mayor Aiken, please.
Thank you, Worship. I move the council accept the bills and payroll for the month of July 2019 as follows. General Government, $290,968.37. General Capital, $307,356.18. Utility Government, $109,566.45. Utility Capital, $32,578.92. And salaries, $267,727.48.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Aiken. Seconded by Councillor Finney. Question?
Question.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Councillor Tower.
Thank you, Your Worship. The information is on pages 20 to 25. Financial statements are included to the end of July 2019. The managers continue to watch through the 2019 approval projects. Overall targets for operational and capital budgets at this time. The revised capital investment plan respecting the gas tax fund was submitted on July 12th, and on August 1st we received the approval and therefore proceed with spending the funds. The total amount of the additional funding for 2019 is $414,082, which were allocated to sanitary sewer trucks, it should be right on, upgrades and additional paving projects. The water meters were read on June 28th for the period of April through to June 19th. The bills went out on July 10th and has a due date of August 12th. The 2019 shut-off notices were issued to 130 accounts for a total of $69,299.26. As of August 6th, we've collected $49,709.32, or 71.7% of the total. Lawrence Street, Phase 2, we've submitted claim number 5 in the amount of $719,076, and this will bring the total claim under the program to $1,636,120. For a total eligible funding of $2,175,291. Claim 4 in the amount of $314,621. Payment was received July 19th. And our treasurer says they're processing these pretty quick for us, which is awful nice indeed. We have motions that are coming forward tonight under new business relating to the up-and-coming UMNB meeting. Finance has prepared motions on the following topics: provincial property tax exemption for fire stations, water and sewer related properties, as well as other municipal properties. Full 100% rebate on the provincial portion of HST for municipalities rather than the current 57,000 the current rate of 57.14%, which would be equal to the current federal rebate of 100% of the HST. And although the federal political parties support the permanent doubling of the gas tax fund for municipalities in the up-and-coming election. So. The bylaws information is on page 26, and animal control is on page 27. We can look at those, or if there's any questions on the rest, feel free to ask. But do take note that our bylaws seems to be working well this year, as we have 239 violations, and then last year there was only 214, so we're being kept busy.
Questions on the report? Councillor O'Neill, please.
Thank you. I've been asked by several people, do the bylaw officers carry cell phones while on duty? And if so, is there a number that they can be reached?
Thank you. Mr. Beal, please.
Yes, the student bylaw officers do carry a cell phone. The number is advertised. I believe Jamie has put it on Facebook and Twitter, as well as on our website as well. We can push that number out. I don't have it right here in front of me, but we can push that number out more in the future as well. I can list it in my council reports next year. By the time I get to September's council report, though, they'll only have a couple weeks of work left. So, but we can push that number out again and send an email and provide that to council if they wish to pass it on to other people.
Is there a place where that could show in the Tribune?
Yeah, I'll talk to Jamie and Ron, and we can definitely get that out in different areas as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Evans, please.
Yeah, and again, it's on the bylaws report. I was really pleased to see that the new occurrences of issues they're dealing with and the completed one, the numbers match up. So they're not just getting them and putting them aside, they're actually dealing with stuff. That's very impressive, and that's I want to commend them on that. I'm a little surprised that the treasurer doesn't have the bylaws officer cell phone on speed dial, but that's just me.
Any other questions on the reports? No? That it? Thank you. We move then to tourism and business development. Councillor Michaud, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report appears on page 28 starts on page 28 of the package, and I'll just touch on a few highlights. If there's any questions, and we'll direct those to Mr. Kelly Spurls at the end. First of all, the visitor numbers for July 2019 are 2751. Last year, they were about the same at 2824. Businesses have been contacted also indicating that business was generally the same as last year. The department hosted a table on July 26th at the Mount Allison Preview Day. We met many incoming students and their families and gave them information about Sackville and our many interesting events and venues and places to eat and shop in town. The department put out a call for business interested in meeting to discuss the town's tourism operations as well as our new business development strategy. The response has been very positive, and we anticipate meeting many businesses over the next few months. This will provide an opportunity to connect with business owners directly and provide valuable insight as we prepare for our more detailed tourism strategic planning sessions, which will be held in the fall. Staff met with Mark Legier, the Regional Trails Coordinator for the Southeast Regional Service Commission. Discussions included the potential of a package connected to the Trans-Canada Trail between Sackville and Port Elgin and possibilities for developing trails on the dikes. Mr. Legier is pursuing more information, and we anticipate further discussions on this topic in the future. We are excited to welcome Nolan Dobbin as a new volunteer at the Visitor Information Center. Nolan is a recent graduate of TRHS who is looking for work experience, and he will be assisting at the Visitor Center as well as helping the guides as they walk around the park interacting with visitors. We're very excited to host Ruth Swansberg, who has a popular Facebook site for families called Everything Unscripted, for a week in July. She is based out of Moncton, and we were her first stop on her summer Pound Stop to CMB tour. Ruth was in town from a Friday evening to Sunday evening and attended several events and visited several of our local tourist attractions. She wrote very favorably about the town, and we are very pleased to have this coverage. Also, the town had a booth at the Area 506 Festival in St. John on the first weekend in August. This is the fourth year we have attended this festival, which is one of the largest music, culture, and good festivals in the province. We spoke with many people interested in visiting Sackville and even some considering moving here. And that's what I have, Your Worship.
Questions on the report? Councillor Evans, please.
Now, you've already admonished us to stick to evidence and facts, but I'm just going to give you anecdotal. I have noticed an awful lot of come from a ways this summer, more than I've ever noticed. Downtown, in restaurants, establishments where you can get beverages. I see a lot of people from away, and so I'm surprised that the numbers are comparable to last year. It just seems to be a lot more people visiting this year than last. So that's all. That's good news, but it's just my observations. I have to bow to your evidence.
Councillor Michaud?
And I agree. I actually had a conversation with a restaurateur downtown on Saturday, and they had indicated that their business was probably at the same level as it is through the school year. And I talked to them about the fact that the numbers weren't as rich as they were last year. And it may be the fact that actually if they aren't hitting all act for the VIC, maybe they're hitting exit 506 and heading town and not venturing to 504 to hit the VIC there. Hard to say what it is, but I'm hearing some good results from folks. So, right.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments on the tourism report? If no, thank you, Councillor Michaud. We move then to item D-E, public property and facilities. Councillor Evans, is that you or is that Councillor Finney?
I did it last.
Councillor Finney.
Thank you, Your Worship. During the month of July, Costin Paving was able to complete the asphalt resurfacing for Phase 1, with the exception of University Avenue, as part of the gas tax funding program. The engineering department had issued another tender for asphalt resurfacing Phase 2, as approved by council, and closed the tender on July 31st, with 4 tender bids being received. A motion will be coming forward during this regular council meeting. The Public Works Department started the reconstruction project for University Avenue during the month of July and currently have the new water main completed and most of the sewer main installed. The Engineering and Public Works Department, as part of our crosswalk evaluation, have taken a closer look at the crosswalk on Main Street near Windsor Hall. The evaluation has taken into consideration lighting, pedestrian safety, and motorists that utilize this busy crosswalk. Various options have been considered and recommendations provided to Council for the consideration. Motion be coming forward tonight. The Engineering Department has been working with Enbridge Gas New Brunswick on a renewal of our municipal agreement that is due to expire on August 31st, 2019. A motion be coming forward in relation to this. The Engineering Department has been working on a design and RFQ for the installation of curb and gutter and sidewalk as part of the improvements to the areas in and around Exit 506. The proposed work is not impacting any future improvements to the area and is work that is mostly town responsibility and not eligible for designated highway funding. The work consists of curb and gutter and sidewalk from Churchill Avenue to the intersection of Bridge Street and Cattail Ridge. Motion be coming. Engineering and Public Works Department, in consultation with their staff, have been looking at options to address the current condition of the salt box on the 2010 International 5-ton plow truck. Recommendations have been provided to Council for the consideration, and a motion will be coming for that as well. The Tantamar Veterans Memorial Civic Center. The ice plant is scheduled to start up on September 3rd, and the first rentals to start the week of September 8th. As part of our regular maintenance program for the TVMCC, staff have been working with Simco to obtain a quotation to perform the necessary maintenance and repairs to our compressors for the Civic Center in preparation for the upcoming season. A motion will be coming forward. Municipal parks. Water samples are now being collected weekly at Lattice Fawcett Park to ensure the water quality is safe for swimming. Staff have also taken blue-green algae tests as well. Over the past several years, the town of Sackville has planted over 150 street trees. The regular attrition rate for planting street tree can be as high as 33% of the trees planted may not survive. The town of Sackville has been very fortunate to have only lost 4 trees, which is 2.6%. During this time, and those trees are under warranty for 5 years and will be replaced at no charge to the town of Sackville. Unfortunately, the exterior washrooms at Bill Johnstone Memorial Park was again seriously vandalized. Therefore, the washrooms will be locked during the night starting at approximately 9:30 p.m. and will be reopened at approximately 7:30 a.m. each day of the week. All departments have been working together to design, plan, and obtain the necessary permits to build the rotary bridge and necessary boardwalk and trails to connect the Lund property to the existing Waterfowl Park trail system. Staff have worked with local contractors to obtain quotes for the construction of the new rotary bridge and connecting boardwalk, as well as the necessary trail work to connect these new trails to existing ones. And a motion will be coming forward.
Any questions on the report? Councillor Tower.
Thank you, Worship. Dwayne, under the second phase of our asphalting, can you list the streets that will be involved with that?
Thank you, Councillor Tower. Those streets would include Walker Road, Ogden Mill Road, Rectory Lane, Clarence Street, Pringle Street, Crestview, Gordon Street, and a section of Ford Avenue.
Councillor Michaud.
Worship, I had a couple of questions, actually. The first one is in regards to the patching program that was completed in July, and the note here that enough budget remaining to complete some fall patching. I'm just wondering if there was verification that all streets were done, because I know out King Street, there's several potholes in one area that still require some attention. So maybe that's why there's still budget left. I'm just wondering if the contractor did manage to get to all the streets and cover all the streets, that's all.
I'll have to check with the Superintendent of Public Works, but it was my understanding that all streets were at least gone over. We always try to maintain some budget for potholes that may have appeared between when they left and this fall, and that could be the case, I'm not sure, but I'll check into that. And we also have some utility cuts, such as the one we just did on Charlotte Street, that need to be fixed, and budget money is left aside to deal with those as well. and we try to, before winter sets in, make sure that we get all the potholes in and around all of our streets.
Thank you. Councillor Evans? Oh, sorry, Councillor Michaud, you have follow-up?
Yeah. Just on the park side, it's a shame to hear about the damage at the Bill Johnstone Park. Are there cameras there? So was this caught? Is there follow-up happening on this, or?
Mr. Cole?
Thank you, Councilor Michaud. Yes, there are cameras in the building. There's 16 actually on the building. The culprit was caught on camera. The RCMP took the gentleman away that evening. It's an ongoing case. I don't know any more details than that. We've supplied the information to the RCMP, and that's where it sits.
It's just that it's a shame that you know, it leads to the fact that we close public property. You know, if we have the checks and balances in place, hopefully it deters it in the future. My last question, I guess, is on park maintenance and cleaning. I know this is our busy season, and I'm wondering through the busy season, I know our parks crew, cleanup crew work kind of Monday to Friday, but has there ever been consideration of staggering that so that it would cover those busy weekends, that we have more activity at Lillis Fawcett Park or at Beach Hill or whatever it might be? Because I'm just kind of wondering if that's ever been considered.
Actually, what we've done is we've made contingency plans with other staff. There are lifeguards working, there are programming staff working. So we have areas where they can put garbage and stuff like that and clean it up on the weekends so that park staff can pick it up on Monday morning so that it doesn't look junky and garbagey. So as of right now, we bring park staff out for special events or in cases where we may get called out because there's a large amount of garbage or something that we have to do, but we don't actually schedule them on a regular basis for weekends.
Councillor Evans, I think you were next, but.
Yeah, I love this report. There's always so much good stuff happening. But I do want to comment in particular on the business about the trees, the planting of 150 trees. I believe that trees are a public good, and they are really old technology. This past month, they provide something called shade, which makes the quality of life in this town much more attractive. So I'm a big supporter of this program of planting trees. Remember when Kevin Anderson was in here talking about the inventory he did and all the trees that have died or been cut down since then. The fact that we're replanting them is really good, and I commend you, and I'm delighted that our success rate is so high.
That's the question? Okay.
It's a comment.
Councillor O'Neill, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This hasn't anything to do with the report, but it does have to do with Falcon Drive. And I just wondered, is that bridge the town or the province? Because that bridge is ragged. The rest of the road is terrific, but.
Mr. Acton?
Yes, thank you, Councillor O'Neill. It is the responsibility of the province, and we have been in touch with them on that bridge, as well as other bridges within town, Donald Harper, the one down on Carter's Turn and so on. So we are working with the province trying to get their attention. They did come by and fix a hole that was there. Some of you may have seen some boards that let go. They were fairly responsive in doing that. We are working with them to try to get them to chip seal the surfaces of the bridges, which is what they used to do years ago. And so we are working with them and trying to get them here to deal with these bridges. Thank you. You're welcome.
Councillor Tower.
Thank you, Worship. Dwayne, because it's a complaint of mine and a worry for the town, of course, is the on-ramp at exit 500. You know, having had conversations with the RCMP and knowing that the Department of Highway has been putting "Do not park here" signs up here, and someone seems to like to collect them, except for one. If it came, I presume we are not allowed to paint on a no parking zone on there. So would that be the Department of Highway, and how will one go about getting them to do it?
Thank you, Councillor Tower. I'd be happy to answer that. I just spoke to Mike again today on this, so there's a few things that we're working on. It is DTI's responsibility. We as the town can't go out and put signs there. I did speak to Ricky Wells, the local guy. He's put me in touch with the sign person or responsible person in the Moncton Tomb Street office that I will be contacting to try to get no parking signs back. We've also, Mike has been working with the bylaw students or officers, I should say, to go up and shoo them away because it is a well field or part of our well field and was within Zone B of our well field area. So Treasurer is working with the bylaw people to try to deter them. And we're also hoping we have the large Wellfield, Town of Sackville Wellfield sign that you see on the backside of Walker Road. We're hoping that if we could put one of those along that exit, they may get the idea that this is why we don't want you to park there. So we're going to look at that as well. So there's a few things that we are working on.
Yep, and so my concern, of course, for right now, I love that idea because showing them along will work. Kicking them from the RCMP would be better, but the bylaws don't work. They may in the summertime have a night shift. And of course, that's when they arrive, somewhere around 10, 11 o'clock at night. And then they're still there sleeping in the morning when I go by with my horn blasting at the door. But I just wondered what we could do. Like, I presume the bylaws officers do work evening shift, but how early do they get back out in the morning if they could?
Mr. Beal?
Yeah, as Dwayne has said, I did meet with the bylaw officers today. The students have all been provided with a memo of direction, as well as Corey, our main bylaw officer. They've been provided copies of our wellfield protection area so that they can hand them out and provide them to them. The bylaw officers are on all night until the students are on until some days till 8 a.m., some days till 9 a.m. So they will be out and about, and they've been given clear direction, memos placed in each of their binders as to what we're looking for them to do.
Yeah, just a thank you for the idea of the big sign. I think it's fabulous, so yes.
Okay. Councillor Finney, you have a motion or two.
Motions, Your Worship. I move the council award tender number 2019-09, asphalt resurfacing of various streets Phase 2 to the lowest bidder, McDonald Paving and Construction Limited, in the amount of $310,397.42, HST included.
Moved by Councillor Finney, seconded by Councillor Evans. Comment? Question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
I move that council approve the work of the Rotary Bridge connection to the Waterfall Park and the Lund property to Sackville General Contracting Limited in the amount of $32,400, HST included.
Moved by Councillor Finney, seconded by Councillor Evans. Open for discussion. Councillor Tower.
Thank you, Worship. I think that we are extremely lucky to have someone like the Rotarians in our community. You know, having projects like this, I think we, as a gem, you know, and if we could find a way to make them part of the picture, it'd be fantastic. So I just want us to send a letter of thank you and say fantastic job.
CAO, will you make a note to form a letter from the mayor or council for that purpose? We do appreciate that. Question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Councillor Finney.
Your Worship, I have a question. If I move this motion forward, am I still allowed to speak on it? I'm trying to remember if I am. I thought at one time I was not.
He can speak on it, but not against it.
Right. So do you want
Then
someone
I
else?
need someone else to turn around and put it forward.
Other council liaison? Councillor Evans, please.
I move that council award RFQ 2019-11 for the signalized mid-block crosswalk to the lowest quote from Roadway Systems Limited in the amount of $32,775,000, HST included.
You can second and speak. If you want to second, you can still speak against it. So do you want to second it? Seconded by Councillor Finney. Motion is for comments. Councillor Finney.
I'll be voting against this, Your Worship, because first of all, I think there's crosswalks not needed there at Windsor, going across there. Their concern of safety, I don't think is as big an issue as they think it is, or the way they put forward. What we have there now, as a matter of fact, the students I find are very cordial, and they turn around and actually stop, and they'll allow the motor vehicles to go by, and then the vehicles will stop and allow the students to cross over as well. So to put out that kind of money, I can't see putting that kind of amount of money on the backs of the taxpayers. Plus also, if it's such a big concern, then I believe Mount A should turn around, at least chip in. But I would still be concerned because of the report that Dr. Fox did in 2006 recommending crosswalk guards, and they didn't even want to turn around and do that back then. I think this is an exorbitant cost and an unnecessary thing to put forward, as a matter of fact, so I'll be voting against it.
Sorry, I didn't see it. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Aiken next.
Thank you, Your Worship. My first inclination was that we should support this and do our due diligence for safety reasons. But as I thought more on it, I realized we've done our due diligence in that we put up, it's a very obvious crosswalk. There's lights over it now there weren't before. There's signage on it there wasn't before. And the students still, I hate to disagree with Councillor Finney, but they take advantage of it and sort of march across. And I've had several instances where I had to stop up pretty quickly. At the end of the day, while I appreciate the work that Mr. Acton's done on getting this RFQ together, I will be voting against this because I think it's just something else that's going to be ignored by the people that are using the crosswalk. So I will not be supporting this.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Evans, I think, was next.
Okay. The main reason this topic has come up and continues to come up is that drivers are frustrated by having to wait for an indeterminate amount of time to get through the crosswalk. Safety is also a concern, but no more so here than has been the case over the years at many other crosswalks around town. The Fox study observed that the vehicular wait times were not particularly bad. More than 90% of vehicles waited less than 10 seconds, and the maximum wait time was less than a minute. Our choice is to do something or do nothing. We could do nothing because the current arrangement has been working more or less for years. But if we are going to do something, I think we should limit our deliberations to options that are legal, doable, and effective. A number of people have brought up the idea of employing a crossing guard. However, a perusal of the Motor Vehicle Act indicates that the only provision therein is for school crossing guards who, and this is a quote from the Act, direct the movement of children across a roadway. I don't see that this applies in this case. While drivers must yield the right-of-way to pedestrians in crosswalks, and pedestrians must yield the right-of-way to drivers when crossing roadways at any point other than a crosswalk, no person, with the exception of peace officers in certain circumstances, has the right to prevent an adult from using a crosswalk or to prevent a driver from driving on a roadway. So I don't believe that employing a crossing guard is an option that is legally open to us. However, both drivers and pedestrians shall obey the instructions exhibited by traffic control signals. This traffic control signal proposed tonight, unlike employing a crossing guard, is legal under the Act, and so is something we could do. As to whether it will be effective or better than the existing arrangement is subject to legitimate, respectful debate. I expect that, as is usually the case, most citizens will obey the law, and at peak times, the alternating of pedestrian and vehicular traffic will appeal to most people's sense of fairness. To the extent that pedestrians will ignore the signals, I expect that it will occur mainly at non-peak situations where there is no traffic and pedestrians will just proceed across the crosswalk without pressing the button, something many of us have been known to do downtown in the early morning or the late evening. There have been complaints and concerns expressed by citizens. Staff have evaluated the situation and made a recommendation. As I see it, we have a choice between following this recommendation or doing nothing. I plan to vote in favor of the motion, but I can understand and will accept the decision to stick with the status quo.
Councillor Evans. Councillor Tower, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too appreciate the work that's been gone into coming up with this idea, but I will definitely be voting against it. I think it's a lot of money being thrown out for something that may or may not work. And from my experience with the students, a lot of times it's not going to work. I've witnessed some students trying to do the right thing and hold back traffic or hold back pedestrian traffic to allow some vehicles, but I've also seen the students just push by themselves, get out of my way, and onwards they go. Crossing guard for children, well, maybe in some situations we have children crossing that road, even though they may be attending Mount Allison University. I realize it's a minority of students that are acting this way, and a lot of them just follow the path like lemmings going across. And if this one says, do not walk, they're still gonna do it, and who's going to nail them for it? They're gonna be gone before anybody's even around. And so I see this as an expensive test to show that it's not gonna work. Even though Michael Fox did his report 13 years ago, I think that it still stands up now that a signal light's the last thing we want to do to interfere with traffic, so.
Thank you, Councillor Tower. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be voting against this as well. I really feel that the onus should be put on Mount Allison to educate the students as they come in September and remind them that they are leaving campus and actually the campus property and are actually crossing a highway. So, and I agree that I don't think that pushing a button is going to make a lot of difference. So once again, I just say I really think Mount A the onus is on them to educate their students that they forget their phones and iPads as they're crossing that highway, pay attention to where they are and where they're going. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question and then a comment afterwards. So my first question is, has the Department of Transportation been contacted in regards to the placement of this, if it's approved?
Mr. Acton.
Yes, thank you, Bishop. Thank you, Councillor Michaud. I did reach out to contact Raymond Brunn last Wednesday, right after the meeting we had, to get an answer. Mr. Brunn was on vacation all of last week. I had staff, I was off as well, but I had staff reach out to their office to find out who else was in charge that could answer the questions. That too, Fred Wilson was also on vacation. So I was not able last week to contact anybody. I did reach out to Mr. Brunn this morning, first thing. He then directs me to a different department who I reached out to. Diane was her name, and I left several messages and emails and no response today. So I have not received a response back from DTI as of yet. All I can do is comment on my past experience with DTI. Typically, they let the town, do their thing, unless it's something that's way out there. We've never ever ran into the opposition from DTI. I don't anticipate any opposition from them on this. It's not a abnormal or unusual request by any means, but I'm still waiting for a response back from them.
Councillor Michaud, follow up.
Just in regards to, I think when it comes to this crossing, it's an adjustment. We see it happen in September. That's when the complaints happen. People adjust their driving. They'll find another route in order to bypass it at peak times, and it may be inconvenient, but I don't believe it's inconvenient enough to actually invest taxpayers' money in putting a light there. I won't be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Butcher.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Dwayne, sorry to hit you with this. Hopefully you can answer them for me now. So people have commented that, maybe the students won't pay attention and they'll just cross anyway. And so what I'm wondering, I know that we don't have a jaywalking bylaw. Do we have a law that says that you can be held accountable if you cross on a no walk light. For instance, in our, at the crosswalks, at the lights here in town center. So if they cross when it says don't walk, then they can be held accountable, yes? And would that be the job of our bylaw officers or the job of the police?
Mr. Beal?
Yeah, we do, I don't believe we have anything in our street traffic bylaw which allows us to. It would be under the Motor Vehicle Act, so it would have to be the police. Unless council chose to add something into our street traffic bylaw that allowed us to lay the charge. It's difficult for bylaw officers to deal with situations where they have to ask for ID. It's easier when it's vehicles, as we know, for parking and things, because we assign a ticket based on a vehicle, and then we can get the registered owner of the vehicle very easily thereafter through the RCMP. But when a bylaw officer, of course, has to ask for ID from someone, if they refuse, it can create an awkward situation and potentially difficult, where they may have to call the RCMP anyway to obtain information. So.
Any other?
Just a short point of clarification.
Okay.
I just want to say that this was brought to us by town staff because it was something we discussed in our planning session. This is not a complaint or request from Mount A. The students don't mind the current situation. This is something, we have had a number of complaints from our citizens, and so we're responding to them. Just want to make that clear.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? If not, I'll call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
We have one. All those against? Can we then have hands up for who said yes? Councillor Black and Councillor Evans. Motion is defeated. Thank you. Councillor Finney, you're up again.
Your Worship. I move that council approve the installation of the curb and gutter and sidewalk near exit number 506, Bridge Street, Cattail Ridge, by A.R. Reitzel Landscaping Limited in the amount of $96,852.43, HST included.
Moved by Councillor Finney, seconded by Councillor Tower. Open for question? Question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Councillor Finney.
I move that council approve the purchase of a new salt truck box for the 2010 International 5-ton truck from Phil La Rochelle Equipment Incorporated in the amount of $30,662.66, HST included.
Moved by Councillor Finney, seconded by Councillor Evans. Councillor Black?
Thank you. At the special council meeting, I had asked about a warranty on the box, and at the time, Todd Hicks had thought that it was a 5-year warranty, and he sent an email to council that I thought should be on the record that the warranty is actually for a year coverage for the box itself and 2-year warranty on all components. Not that, I don't know if that may change people's opinion, but it should be noted.
Thank you. Clarify the public record from last time. That's good. No other call for question of Councillor Finney?
I just want to add, as a matter of fact, the reason we're buying a new one, just so that people will know out there, is because if you keep repairing it, it doesn't last. You might get 2 more years out of that before it's all full of holes again. And then it's got to be done all over. The amount of money that's spent in order to turn around and do for just 2 years, you're looking at the time, the materials, it could be $10,000, $15,000. So to buy a new one, which will last probably the lifetime of the truck, is in the best interest of the people and the best way to spend the money. So I just want to make that clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Finney. Question?
Question?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Councillor Finney again.
Yes, Your Worship. I move the council approve the preventative maintenance work to the compressors at the TVMCC to Toromont Simcoe in the amount of $8,349.12, HST included.
Moved by Councillor Finney. Seconded by Councillor O'Neill. Question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Councillor Finney again.
Yes, Your Worship. I move that council authorize the mayor and clerk to sign and seal the extension agreement of the existing contract with Enbridge Gas until October 31st, 2019.
Moved by Councillor Finney. Seconded by Councillor Tower. Question? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
I think that's it, Your Worship.
That's my count.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, that is it for public property and facilities. We move to recreation programs and events. Oh, Mr. Finney, are you up again?
What's that?
Councillor O'Neill. Okay. Councillor O'Neill, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The summer programs will continue to go well with most of the programs and all three of our camps being full. The opening of the Natural Playground at Lilas Fox Park was another successful event with hundreds of people showing up to see the new space and also get a cup of ice cream and a dip in the lake. The Friday night cruise event was a big success. Hundreds of people enjoyed I think there was 106 classic cars that lined Main Street that evening, along with the great music of Eddie Chase and the Graffiti Four. Personally, I've received a lot of comments from people outside that say that they wish there was more events than just this take part on our Friday nights here in town. So. Registration has been extended for the PEI bus trip to Shining Waters, which takes place on August the 27th. For the first time, they're hosting a senior prom for singles and couples that graduated in 1976 or earlier. The event will take place at the Music Barn on August the 22nd and will include great oldies music from the Cool Water Band. Tickets must be purchased in advance at Town Hall or at sackville.com. 40 adults and 30 kids took part in this year's Beach Hill Park Challenge obstacle course race, which made it another success. New Brunswick Day celebrations were held at the Bill Johnson Memorial Park on August the 5th. The weather was perfect and lots of people turned out to enjoy the activities, including the popular Family Cup Challenge, along with great live music by the Little Jills and Junior Jills. The Sackville Street Chalk Art Festival will take place August the 23rd and 24th. This event will include live music, 11 chalk artists, several workshops, and much more. Sackville Pride Week will take place from September the 11th to the 18th in partnership with Sackville, Mount A, and Mount Allison Students Union. The 19th Annual Fall Fair will be held September the 18th to the 22nd. New features this year will include a live comedy act from Marshall Button at the Vogue Theatre and a harvest dinner in the tent hosted by the Sackville Farmers Market. With the library, during July, the library offered 10 adult programs, 15 young adult programs, and a 30 participants and 52 children's program. 2,104 people visited the library during the month as well. The 120 kids who registered for the summer reading program have read over 1,000 books so far this summer. And an ad has been posted to fill a non-call casual position at the library. And if there's any questions?
Councillor Finney?
I just wanted to ask Mr. Pride, could you tell me when the trip to the island for Mamma Mia is?
Sure, yeah, it's actually this Saturday. Yeah.
I have a problem. I misplaced my ticket. What do I do?
Buy another one.
They don't have any more. They don't have any more tickets. All the seats are filled. What shall I do? Just show up and it'll be all right?
Just wait patiently to see if someone drops out, I'd say.
Councillor Tower?
Thank you. I have just a simple question. What's the ticket price for the dance at the barn? $20? Okay, thank you.
Sorry, could you say that louder so everybody?
He said $20 for the tickets, and I was
Okay.
just wondering, so, yep, thank you.
Okay, I just note that the harvest dinner that you noted, that there were only a couple of tickets left on Saturday when I went to the farmer's market. Literally, only about 5 or 6 tickets were left at that point. So if anybody's looking, they should get them quickly. And also that in terms of your request for Friday nights, I was in Summerside, and every Friday night in July is a car show in the downtown core. And they fill that downtown for that every Friday, 4 Fridays of August. Yeah, there you go. Okay, any other questions? You have motions, Councillor O'Neill.
I move that council grant the temporary street closure of York Street from Salem Street to Main Street, as well as Main Street from York to Town Hall, from approximately 5:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Thursday, September the 12th, to accommodate the Pride Parade.
I'd be proud to accept
Moved
that.
by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Evans. Question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. That is it for recreation. Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. We'll move to public safety. Oh, sorry, Councillor O'Neill again.
I have to listen to me again. Training sessions that took place in the month of July for the fire safety was pump operations, water rescue simulations. Members also conducted station and equipment checks to ensure all equipment remains in a state of readiness. There will be 2 motions coming forward this evening for consideration. One is a motion to dispose of 15 2216 PSI carbon fiber cylinders to the Village of Cap Pelé Fire Department. And the second motion is a motion to dispose of 3 2216 air packs, 2002 edition, to Holland College Fire Program. And the reason being that these air packs and cylinders have been taken out of service as they are no longer required by our local department. Fire Chief Craig Bowser, Deputy Chief Mike Green, Deputy Chief Sean Finney, Lieutenant Randy Clare, and firefighter Jillian Hunt attended the 105th Maritime Fire Chiefs Conference in Moncton, which they found it was very educational. Congratulations to Chief Bowser, as he has been elected to 2nd Vice President for the Maritime Fire Chiefs Association. Each day now is getting closer to the annual truck draw, and the department is encouraging everyone to make sure you pick up your tickets. You notice that wasn't just one ticket, that's more than one. Just a reminder, the chief didn't have that here, but I just thought I'd add that. Just a reminder, rubbish fires are strictly prohibited within our town limits. And having outside fires do require wood burning appliance, which is manufactured non-combustible enclosed container designed to hold a small fire. And again, the chief reminds us how important it is to have an emergency kit prepared to last 72 hours in the case of an emergency. And that is the fire chief's report. I think we have a deputy over here, or someone that could answer questions if anybody has any, and I do have a couple of motions.
Are there questions on the fire report? Deputy Chief Sean Finney is here and ready to answer any.
Somebody ask him a question.
Yeah. He wants to get on the camera. No? Okay, we'll go with motion, please.
Thank you. I move that council authorize the disposal of 15 2216 PSI carbon fiber cylinders to the Village of Cap Pelé Fire Department in the amount of $4,000 plus HST.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Tower. Councillor Michaud, please.
I'm waiting for the motion to ask my question. I didn't have a question, but I want, as regards to this, just for clarification, the items are no longer required for, by the department. Is it because there was an excess in equipment, or is it because the equipment was replaced? Is there any other information on that?
Deputy.
Sure, thanks, Councillor Michaud.
in keeping up with the NFPA 2013-20 standards, we've moved away from the 2216 bottles and gone with 4.5s, which is 4,500 PSI. So the bottles and packs no longer compatible with what we have now.
But they are still usable by Cap Palais, is that?
Absolutely,
they
the
have a
Cap Palais has 2216s where we've moved, the 4,500 PSI is a high pressure bottle and the 2216s are low pressure. So it's compatible with what they have and not with what we have now.
Good. Any other questions? Question on the motion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried.
And I have one more motion, Your Worship. I move that council authorize the disposal of 3 2216 air packs, 2002 edition, to the Holland College Fire Program in the amount of $1,500 plus HST.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Finney. We had same question. And the reason it goes to NBCC is it for educational purposes or?
The Holland College?
Holland College.
It's further training program, yes.
Thank you. Question? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Did you get enough airtime on that? Yeah. All right. Police, Councillor Butcher, please.
Thank you. In July, there were 147 calls for service in the community. There were 12 disturbance calls and 11 false alarms. There were only 3 Mental Health Act investigations. 2 break-and-enters were reported, 1 business and 1 residence. There were 11 theft-related investigations. However, the only discernible crime pattern was related to 2 new residents of the community who were in conflict. So these people were responsible for a significant portion of the increased demands of service. However, investigational efforts resulted in the disruption of this pattern. So I wondered if they'd been shown out of town, but apparently that's not how we do it. Everything is settled now. On the traffic side, there were only 2 collisions in the town in July. There were a few traffic tickets written, check stops, and foot patrols. The CPO, along with some of the officers, conducted a variety of crime prevention activities, which included the bike rodeo, educational check stops, and positive ticketing initiatives. Sappy Fest weekend, from a policing perspective, the weekend was uneventful. There were 2 minor calls for service related to the event, but there were no arrests and no provincial offenses detected during the foot patrols or the vehicle patrols at the site or near the site. And that's my report.
Thank you. Question? Anybody? Councillor Michaud, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. There has been some questions, I guess, raised prior, and I think it was done so again just recently in regards to our facilities here for the RCMP incorporating cells for disorderly folks. It's been indicated that there's been some difficulty in finding personnel to man them when need be, and they've reverted back to what they were doing before the new facility was built, to transporting people to Shediac. And I know that there's really no additional expense to the community for that. However, I'm also wondering when an officer is out of town for however long it takes to do that, if that position is being backfilled so that we maintain the same number of officers here in case they are required.
So the question for, I don't know if it's CIO or treasurer, but the question is the situation with the use of jailers in the contract with the RCMP and how that works. Would it be to use?
I guess, Your Worship.
Press that again.
Dueling buttons.
Too quick. I'll attempt to answer it as best I know. Obviously, Sergeant Paul Gagne would be better able to answer the information, but at the time this facility was built and the jail cell was provided, the RCMP in the town moved away from the responsibility of hiring and having its own jailers, and it was became a contracted service that the RCMP looked after. There was a security requirement that they had to clear as well. They hired them and brought them in as need be. To the best of my knowledge, that still continues whenever the cells are required. I and staff are well aware when sometimes those guests are downstairs. We hear of them and their activities. So I know they're being used from time to time. How frequent, I couldn't answer that. I also know that on occasion that they are transporting people to Shediac. As we all know too, in terms of our Sackville detachment and the rural detachments, there's a number of members. They tend to cover off and cross over the boundary sometimes from an operational purpose. I'm not sure whether or not there's times when we are not covered. Sergeant Gagné would have to answer that question. So I'm not sure if that covers all of your questions. Cost-wise, there's no cost to us, added costs wherever the offender resides. If Sackville detachment picks them up and transports them to Shediac, we pay for their night. The same happens in reverse. If there are out-of-towners visiting and not behaving and end up downstairs, then they're charged back to that municipality as well.
Is it worth ensuring our next meeting with your RCMP addresses this topic?
If there's more questions, or if there's certain questions that weren't answered, by all means, and it would be helpful to, we could always share whatever those questions might be with Sergeant Gagné, so he's prepared too.
Okay, so if people have that, you can either send it to me and I'll collate them, or you can send it directly to the CAO if you have those. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Just for information, a couple of months ago, the Treasurer and I attended a policing forum in Moncton, and this is one of the things we brought up, was that transporting prisoners is something that could be done by somebody other than RCMP officers, and they seemed, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but they seemed quite interested in the idea of other people doing it other than our RCMP.
Good. So let's, maybe we can consider that question. There are sheriff roles for some of these things, and whether that changes our relationship in the contract or not, we'd like to understand that. So, okay. Okay, is there any other comments on public safety? There's no motion under this element, is there? No other comment? Okay, we'll move on to policy bylaw. And Councillor Butcher, please.
Thank you. Policy Bylaw Liaison Group met on July 17th. Bylaw number 268, a bylaw respecting the bonding of officers and employees, received first reading at the regular council meeting last month on July 8th. This bylaw has been advertised, and second and third reading will be brought forward tonight. Town of Sackville Workplace Harassment and Violence Policy number 2019-01 was passed at the regular council meeting on July 8th. The policy has been provided to all staff, and each staff employee was required to sign off acknowledging that they had received the policy. In addition, the policy includes mayor and council, so a copy will be provided to each elected official in the near future for us to sign off on as well. The town's present and proposed dangerous and unsightly premises bylaw has been forwarded to legal for their review to ensure that we have covered everything and that it is accurate under the legislation. It's our hope to bring this bylaw to the September Policy Bylaw Liaison meeting. And Lori Bickford is working on amendments to the town subdivision bylaw. This bylaw is anticipated to be brought to the September Policy Bylaw meeting as well. And that's my report, and I have one motion.
Councillor Evans, questions on the report?
Yeah, item number 4. This is, pay attention, I'm asking you a question. Dangerous and unsightly premises. This is every municipal council's worst nightmare, and every group has been trying to find a way to deal with this. Do I have reason to be optimistic that the new Local Governance Act is going to allow us to come up with a bylaw that will make dealing with this easier, better, come to better resolutions, or should I just go back to being discouraged?
My response to that would be, it's always good to be optimistic.
But there is not a significant change under the new Local Governance
No.
Act from the previous terms.
No.
So be optimistic.
Thanks, John.
Councillor O'Neill.
Once again, I'm not sure if this is where I should be asking this, but there are several properties that, driving around town, I see where people have thrown crap out alongside the road, chairs or carpeting or whatever. Allison Avenue was one, and I think that's been there for at least 2 weeks, if not longer. And I just wonder, is that something that the town, if those places are there, do our employees pick that up? Like, it's terrible to see that stuff just left there week in and week out. So I don't know how we address that, but I had a gentleman ask me the other day, he said, who do I call? He said, to get stuff cleaned up that's next door to me, and so I just told him to
We'll
call
ask
our
Mr. Beal to
CAO and he'd
reply,
look
please.
after it. But
Yeah, anytime anyone sees issues like that, it would be highly suggested that they call Town Hall, 364-4930, and ask to speak to the bylaw officer. He will open a file accordingly, and there's a couple areas. It could fall under dangerous and unsightly. It could also fall under maintenance occupancy bylaw as well. The bylaw officer would then reach out to the homeowner and give him direction to have that cleaned up accordingly with a time period. Otherwise, he may be charged under one of our bylaws and or issued an order to clean up. So if that's seen at any point in time, definitely we would look for a complaint. But I will also pass that on to the student bylaw officers and have them keep their eyes out a little better as to if there's situations like that, and we will follow up on that accordingly.
thank you, sounds great.
No other comments? Oops, CAO, please.
Just to comment on the unsightly premises bylaw, while it's not as perhaps stringent and strong as we'd like it to be, our bylaw officers have been in the past working on various files, and it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And I mean, we have had, you know, some satisfaction in properties being addressed and over time. So I mean, but it is a long haul, and legally there is a process there, and I guess depends how, you know, strenuous we are in following and trying to advise and work with the property owners to look after their properties. So, and ultimately, if they don't, as you recall, we may need to have a motion back here to take further action, which the council has done in the past, and they've been acted on, and so it's not like it's not just false words. There is something to work on.
Thank you for that reminder. Councillor Butcher, you have a motion.
I do. I move that council give second reading, section by section, to bylaw number 268, a bylaw respecting the bonding of officers and employees. Public notice is hereby given that the Town Council of the Town of Sackville proposes to enact the following bylaws. Bylaw number 268, a bylaw respecting the bonding of officers and employees. Section 1, purpose. Section 2, officers and employees. Section 3, payment of bond. Section 4, meaning of bond. Section 5, repeal.
Moved by Councillor Butcher. Seconded by Councillor Black. Question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Back to you, Councillor Butcher, you have another.
I do. I move that council give third and final reading to bylaw number 268, a bylaw respecting the bonding of officers and employees.
Moved by Councillor Butcher, seconded by Councillor Black. Question? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Councillor Butcher. We now move to item I, personnel. Councillor Evans, please.
Following is an overview of recent activities during the past month. A liaison meeting was held on August 8th. As of the end of July, there were 37 permanent employees, 2 temporary employees, and 32 summer students. 2 grievances are currently being addressed, one on call-out provisions and one with regard to statutory pay. All departments have been very busy on a number of fronts, and our summer students have been a significant factor in helping us get the job done over the summer in various departments throughout the town. As summer winds down with only a few weeks remaining, what a depressing report, we wish to thank the students for the great job they've done over the summer in their various capacities. And I would like to add that one of the reasons why this report is always short and vague is because virtually everything we discussed is protected under the Right to Information Protection and Privacy Act. And so HR matters, personnel matters are things which, as you all know as employees, you wouldn't want discussed in public. So we're obliged to do that out of respect for and the law requiring us to protect the privacy of individuals.
Thank you. Any questions on the report? Hearing none. Thank you, Councillor Evans. We move to item J, Corporate Affairs and Strategic Development. Council Deputy Mayor Aiken, are you doing this?
Apparently.
I didn't know it was my turn.
Okay, I'll try and hit the highlights of the report without a cheat sheet from Jamie. Following our Chamber of Commerce Greater Moncton presentation on June 9th to create a Sackville chapter in town, we are pleased to partner with the Chamber for a business after hours event on Wednesday, August 14th. We'll provide another opportunity for the Chamber to explore its presence in Sackville, and interested business owners, operators can contact the Chamber of Commerce and Greater Moncton to register. This is the first initiative to get underway in our new business development strategy. Excuse me. In partnership with Mount Allison's Experiential Learning Department, the town secured a grant of $10,000 from Future Ready New Brunswick for a pilot project that will examine the key factors that are necessary in the local ecosystem for businesses to develop and survive and contribute to a small town. The project will be facilitated by the Experiential Learning Department at Mount Allison and will feature a course, Business in a Small Town, with a public presentation of the students' findings that will be hosted in Town Hall in the fall. As noted in June, staff have been working on a new marketing and communications plan. Our strategic plan identifies communications and marketing as one of the strategic directions for the municipality. In doing so, the town recommend the town develop a communications and marketing plan. This plan will be developed in 2 parts. The communications piece will be developed internally, while external expertise will be required for the marketing portion. The intent of the marketing plan is to identify the town's positioning and provide guidance for marketing initiatives and other public-facing communication activities, including tourism promotion events, corporate branding, etc. Furthermore, this project will be expected to determine whether the current branding material is appropriate or not, and if necessary, will establish what the town's new branding will be. The RFP was issued on July 12th and closed on July 29th with 2 submissions, and a motion is forthcoming. At the start of July, we started posting weekly water quality testing results at Silver Lake and have dedicated a page on the website that explains our testing procedures. Over the month, the testing is carried out for the presence of cyanobacteria, or blue-green algae, on 2 separate occasions, mid-July and the 1st of August, and given the warm water temperatures and lack of rain. All water quality testing to date has shown that Silver Lake water is very clean and there are no problems with it. We continue our testing program for the balance of the summer. The town released an off-leash dog park survey on July 10th. It's proven to be extremely popular. The idea has been raised directly by residents over several years, and along with our consultation process for the Recreation Master Plan, Exit 506 Use and Functioning Planning Study, and other initiatives. The survey provided feedback in terms of overall need, potential locations, features, and design, and concerns people may have. The survey closed with 466 responses, which are now being analyzed by staff, and we appreciate the feedback. We were pleased to welcome the 2nd annual SHAD Mount Allison class over the month of July. SHAD is a Canada-wide nonprofit enrichment program for outstanding high school students. And after welcoming the students to Town Hall on Tuesday, July 2nd, the town hosted a networking event and barbecue with the students on July 11th, and received help from the students in the Town University marketing efforts on July 18th. In addition, staff presented to the students on the town's Lawrence Street stormwater mitigation, and it was a pleasure to be involved in the program and connect with the students in town. We already look forward to welcoming the 2020 SHAD program and hope that some of the 2019 students will return to study at Mount Allison. We have a memorandum of understanding with SHAD through 2022, so it'll be coming at least that long. With the naturalized stormwater retention pond now finished, we continue to receive positive feedback on our Lawrence Street Phase 2 project. The pond is working as planned and overall providing a very popular with pedestrians, cyclists, dog walkers, and a variety of species of birds already moved into the area. As the natural vegetation continues to mature, the pond will become more attractive. Interpretive panels are now being designed that will explain the benefits of the naturalized system and provide educational opportunities for students and visitors. And that's the report, Your Worship. Is there any questions?
Are there any questions on the report? Councillor Evans, please.
Yeah, once again, not questions, but comments. I'm really pleased about the water testing stuff. I'm pleased with the results, but I'm pleased with that program. I think it was just last year where, to go to the mayor's comment about evidence-based information, someone started the rumor that we had a blue-green algae problem, and these tests are not cheap. I believe they cost hundreds of dollars. We have to send them to Montreal to get them done. And it turned out that, in fact, the water was okay, but for that information vacuum, people were thinking terrible things about Silver Lake. So the fact that we're doing this stuff prophylactically is good. It's expensive, but it means the information's out there and people know periodically that everything's okay. So I commend you for doing that. I'm really impressed with the number of survey results you got for the dog park. Any time in a town this size you can get 446 respondents, you've got a lot of interest, so that's impressive. And then the last two things are just kudos to the staff involvement in, I know Jamie is a big part of the SHAD, I don't know what you call it, community liaison or something. They really appreciate it. It's a huge benefit for the town to get all these kids here, and some of them end up going to Mount A. And again, the water retention pond, I'm a frequent user. I think it's wonderful. So once again, kudos to that.
Councillor Tower.
Thank you, Worship. Jamie, we had 2 RFP responses. Who was the other company?
Thank you, Councillor Tower. We had 2 submissions, one from Portfolio Group out of Moncton, and the other from Insight Branding and Marketing from Charlottetown, PEI.
So can you, because you've made a recommendation, can you tell us a reason why you chose the company you did?
Can we wait for the motion on that, and then we'll do it in the motion?
Oh, okay, no, so I just, okay, fine, yep, all right.
Is that a comment, or your prepared comment from Deputy Mayor Aiken, please?
I don't know who to ask this of. The water testing, is there a specific lab we're required to send it to? Or is there some regulations about who can do the testing? Does any?
Mr. Burke, please.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor Aiken. We followed when the issue arose last summer, we reached out to the City of Moncton, who, as we all know, regularly tests for the presence of cyanobacteria, given they have a potable water system and some issues around it, as well as some other areas within their municipality. We basically went with the same lab that they use, which is out of Montreal. It's my understanding, in speaking both with the City of Moncton as well as the New Brunswick Department of Health, that there are very few accredited laboratories in Canada that can do cyanobacteria testing of that nature.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. The reason I ask is that at Mount Allison we have people working on cyanobacteria who are world-recognized experts on this stuff. And it seems to send out a town for that is sort of, if the labs have to be accredited, well, that solves the problem. Okay.
Mr. Burke?
That is exactly the issue, Deputy Mayor. It needs to be an accredited laboratory. We have had very positive discussions very recently with even some of the new faculty at Mount Allison University who have a very specific area of research interest in cyanobacteria. So we're certainly looking forward to working with them in the future, given that You know, we all know weather patterns are changing. We, you know, feel it's our own responsibility to do some regular testing at Silver Lake as well. So they're certainly going to be able to help us with some guidance going forward on a more rigorous testing program, no question about it.
Councillor Finney?
Yeah, I was just noticing, there's a meeting with representatives at Mount Allison on their emergency alert software. Who would you have met with, and what is that emergency alert software? Can you tell me something about it? I never even heard of it.
Mr. Burke?
The university has a similar software program that we use, which is we use Sentinel Alerts, which is a New Brunswick-based company out of Bathurst, New Brunswick. The Mount Allison uses a company called Everbridge, which is more well-recognized, certainly among larger institutions, for emergency alerting and to get messages out across a large number of people. I guess we were just comparing notes on our experience using our own emergency alert system based on that of the program that the university uses, which is similar but quite different. One is much more modern, more user-friendly, pros and cons to both. So we met with the John Gillis, our Director of Information Technology, and Rob Hiscock, the Director of Marketing and Communications, just to kind of share notes and see if there was a potential for us to improve the way we notify our own residents with our own software program, or potentially to change programs if the other software were to be proven to be more effective or useful, valuable, et cetera. But it was simply just an exploratory conversation to share notes.
I didn't even hear Virginia, that's what I'm asking. So, and the other question was, you said a meeting with a professor at Mount Allison on water quality research. Who would be the prof and who would be doing that?
It's a new, thank you, Councillor Finney. It's a new tenure track appointment with Dr. Justin Leifer, and his specific area of interest, which is what Deputy Mayor Aiken was referring to earlier, is in cyanobacteria testing. He's got a significant amount of experience undertaking these types of testing with this particular research area. So we certainly look forward to collaborating with him in the future on our own testing program.
Okay, I think that you have some motions. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Worship. I move the council award RFP number 2019-08 marketing plan to Portfolio Moncton, New Brunswick in the amount of $15,000 plus HST.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Aiken. Seconded by Councillor Evans. Councillor Finney?
I'll be voting against it, and the reason is because I don't know anything about the company. I'd like more information, and I'd like to get some background on the company as well, so I can just weigh and balance to see if we're getting our money's worth. And so, if anything, we can maybe put it off to another time. So, anyway, thank you.
Councillor Tower, do you want to ask your question?
I do, yes. So Jamie, my question was the horse before the cart. Can you tell me the basic reason why you chose Portfolio over Insight?
Thank you, Councillor Tower. I guess, as I indicated in last week, we're fortunate, I guess, to get two very good, high-quality submissions. So it's never an easy decision or slam dunk to review a request for proposals, which is fundamentally different than a tender. A tender is based on price. A request for proposals is based on the overall proposal, finance, experience, the proposal itself, the delivery of it, as well as any value added that we feel is necessary. So really the onus is on us to go through those with a fine-tooth comb and find the area that we think the company has best responded to our requests. So I guess what we particularly liked about Portfolio was they've worked with two municipalities just up the road, the town of Riverview and City of Moncton. But we also like their the methodology that they're looking to use to get the marketing plan done. And really that was a big difference between the two submissions. It was clear, it was concise, we think it was realistic, and that they really understood what we were looking for. You know, there's a lot of companies out there that can do this type of work, as you can see with the companies that have picked up this package. But I guess what we were very upfront about in the request for proposals document was that we're not indicating that we need a rebranding exercise. We're saying we want you to review and validate our branding. We've just invested heavily in a new website. Our business cards are updated. We're kind of moving into that modern era with some elementary design changes, but we're not saying that we need to start fresh and do a whole new rebranding exercise. That can be complicated, expensive, and unnecessary. And I think Portfolio really understood where we were. They seemed to do their homework on us as a municipality and some of the marketing materials that we're using, and we felt really comfortable overall with their submission.
Councilor Michaud.
Your Worship, I just want to say thank you for the information, Mr. Burke, that I didn't have a chance to go through it in detail. I skimmed over it in regard to the proposal. I really would feel more comfortable having some more time to look at it, and if I did have some questions, I could ask staff those questions. And I'm just kind of wondering, is there a time crunch here? Is it something that we could wait until September on? One thing I did notice in it is like I think it's a 16-week process that they go through or whatever. So I'm just kind of wondering if that's a possibility here, or if there's a deadline that was looming that we needed to kind of look at this tonight.
Well, I guess in terms of the overall project, there's not an immediate time crunch. I guess our strategic plan indicated this was part of the work that was supposed to be done in 2018. And I guess we specifically kind of bumped that into 2019 because we had so many plans underway during the last year. The only issue is the budget commitment. We would have to go back to each company that submitted to ensure they're going to hold their price, because prices are dependent on a 30-day, at least in some of the submissions are based on 30 days. But in terms of overall, that would be the only issue. The time frame is about 16 weeks. And both companies were on about the 16-week time frame.
Any other questions on that?
I did catch a bit of it. I've read a little bit of it. As a matter of fact, that you sent at 3:55 today. The thing is, I think it said there was a 90-day guarantee for that 15 plus HST. So we got 90 days, I believe. I think I've caught that correctly. I could be wrong, but.
While he's skimming, are there other questions people want to ask
No.
on this question? Right?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Finney. You're right. The 30 days is with respect to the invoicing at the end of the project, and all the invoices have to be in. But they have agreed to hold the price for 90 days.
Councillor Tower.
I would like to move that we table this till next month, bring it back then, so we have more time to read through it. I really appreciate the extra information he's given tonight, which changed my thought in some directions, but I still like to know a bit more about them. And it's not that I don't trust his judgment, it's just that I'd like to be, because we just got it last week, and now I'd like to have more time to look at it, that's all.
Okay. Councillor Tower, you were making a motion. Could you just articulate that?
Yes.
What is your motion?
I'd like to table this and delay this motion until September.
Moved by Councillor Tower, seconded by Councillor Michaud. So that now is on the floor. Comments, questions on that? Hearing none. So the question on the floor is to table for next meeting. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? So the motion is carried and there is unanimous. Okay, thank you. It is tabled for 1 month. Okay. Deputy Mayor, you have another.
Thank you, Worship. I move the council authorize staff to enter into a purchase and sale agreement to sell a portion of the land for public purposes identified by PID number 70435433 as presented during the in-camera meeting on June 3rd, 2019, and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign and seal the transfer documents.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Aiken, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Tower.
Thank you, Worship. Just because this is being recorded and the dollars that come from this sale go to where?
Mr. Bill?
Yep, the, since this was assigned as parkland back in its day, any money from sale of parkland is deposited into a reserve account for acquiring and developing parkland, which has to be used specifically to create a playground, to develop, purchase other parkland in the future. So it will earn interest in the bank account till such time as recommendation from staff or council choose to spend that money on specifically parkland items.
Thank you.
Question? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
Your worship, I think I have a conflict of interest in this next one.
Oh, right. Thank you. Thanks for reminding me. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. I move the council authorize the transfer of $17,700 to Renaissance Sackville from the town's 2019 operating budget to cover existing commitments and new project submissions, and in doing so encourages the Renaissance Sackville to continue to focus on economic development-related initiatives. Furthermore, should Renaissance receive additional funding applications over the balance of 2019, they'll be required to report and request such needs from council prior to future commitments and disbursements, given the anticipated review of the town's grant programs leading into 2020.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Aiken. Seconded by Councillor Finney. Question? Councillor Michaud, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just some clarity. I know that we've talked about this with Renaissance a couple of times, and I know that there's been a couple of numbers. One regards to covering existing commitments, and now I see we're including the new project submissions. I know we had talked about that previously. What's the differences in that? And I kind of would like to know how far along they were in those new project submissions. I do understand the commitment that they've already made, and the fact that there was expectation in the budget that they were expecting funding from the municipality, and I have no issue with that, but I guess the new project submissions, I'm just kind of wondering how far along they were, and if that's something that maybe we should wait on until they have those kind of finalized before we forward the money on for those.
Mr. Burke, would that be you?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Michaud. The funding applications, my understanding, they've only been submitted, so the board has not met to adjudicate any of those applications. So all this would be doing would be advancing some money for them to award those grants or not, depending on what that adjudication process would be.
So what transpires, I guess, if they choose not to support these, then that the monies that have been forwarded in addition to what they've already committed to, that remains with them to do as for other submissions that they might receive?
That's correct.
Any other? Call for question? Oh, CAO, wish to clarify?
I guess, Your Worship, just pending the last question by Councillor Michaud, if that was a determinant factor, or anyone thought that was a determinant factor, you have the opportunity to look at money for committed projects and park money for the, projects that are still to be adjudicated on, and make it two motions. So an amendment, if there was a sense that way, rather than defeat the entire motion, perhaps, if council felt that those new project applications funding wasn't appropriate. So,
Councillor Evans?
There are three categories. There are the ones that they've already approved. They're the ones that they have received applications for and have not yet decided upon. And then there are possible ones that come in the future. We're agreeing to fund. This motion is about funding the first two categories. Yeah, okay. I'm happy with the motion the way it is, so I'm not speaking about dividing it up, but I appreciate the advice.
Councilor Michaud?
And I want to thank Mr. Hanrahan for indicating that, because I think that's something to be considered. Myself, right now, I'm comfortable based on how the organization is functioning to expend what they've already committed to, because the anticipation was to get that. But in regards to next steps, I would feel more comfortable in the fact that we'd expend that maybe in a second motion, depending on what their outcome of their deliberation was as a group or as Renaissance.
So would you be proposing a motion then?
I would, yeah.
You propose a motion that they,
that we would cover their existing commitments, and then once they have deliberated on the new project submissions, that we would advance accordingly at that time, the remainder.
Mr. Burke?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I guess, just to be, I think the motion needs to be clear, because I don't think you want to put Renaissance in a position where they've made a commitment to another organization and then need to come to council for an additional approval, unless that's the intent, that Renaissance will be given a recommendation to council. But I think we need to be clear to go back to Renaissance and that what the direction of council is, because they are, to a large degree, making commitments with small business owners. So I just wouldn't want them to be thinking, should they award a grant or not? So I think if it's a recommendation based on that additional funding, I think that needs to be clear to be fair to them.
So you want to try that again? Or?
Well, I guess the thing is that I understand that concern, but I also, as a councillor in expending this money, I have a concern in the fact that we have an organization here that appears to me, anyway, to be kind of in a rebuild mode, and trying to find their way as well. You look at their website, and they still have their board of directors from 2014. They don't have their new directors listed. They still have their policy and their bylaws still reflect what Renaissance was when it first existed back in the early 90s. Their mandate has somewhat changed. The sense I'm getting is that I think they're trying to find their way. And in doing that, I want to ensure that, we continue to support based on what we've committed to as a council. However, do it in a way that's responsible to the taxpayer as well, and indicating that, and I'm not sure how we should word that. And I would take any direction, but I would feel more comfortable at this point in time, instead of grouping it all together, to somehow separate it if we could.
Deputy Mayor Aiken, do you have a?
To that point, I think if you want to change it, if you strike out the new project submissions, you have to change the dollar amount as well, correct? And I mean, with the agreement of the seconder, I would see that as I would take that as a friendly amendment, so I don't have to go through the striking entire new motion.
Do you want to read it as you would see it as a friendly amendment to it?
As I would see it, as I move the council authorize the transfer of some lesser amount of money, whatever that might be, to Renaissance Sackville from the town's 2019 operating budget to cover existing commitments, and in doing so encourages Renaissance. So strike out the new project submissions and change the dollar amount.
Mr. Burke?
Yeah, the number would be, approximately $11,500.
So, agreement on a friendly amendment as noted?
So, a question. We're not separating this into two parts. We're changing it so that we're funding the stuff they've already committed to, and then everything else, the stuff they're entertaining now and anything future, is going to require separate approval from us? Is that?
Separate budget amount to be approved, yes.
Okay. All right. I'm not in favor of that, so that's fine. I understand what the motion is.
Okay. So, friendly amendment to the, we now have that on the table. Can I call a question on that? So, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, so let me have hands up. Those in favor? Councillor Finney, Deputy Mayor Aiken, Councillor Tower, and Councillor Michaud. And opposed is Councillor Butcher, Black, and Evans. Okay? So, motion is approved. Okay. Someone want to seek our,
I guess, and you still have a motion, I assume that Councilor Michaud withdrew.
we didn't get a second.
There was no seconder, so, but
Through discussion.
if you're withdrawing, it doesn't appear in the minutes of next month, next meeting.
Okay.
I recall the discussion now.
There's also a recording right now too, so we hear that.
Okay.
Okay.
That'd be fun.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, that's it for, okay. So that's good. We move to item number 9, which is new business. We have a variety of, I believe, 5 in total, potential motions to advance to the Union of the Municipalities of New Brunswick. And Councillor Tower, you want to start?
Yes, Your Worship, I have the first 2 motions. Whereas the municipalities pay provincial property tax on properties that they own, whereas these taxes paid are significant expenses to municipalities in their annual operating budget, whereas currently rinks, libraries, and fully volunteer-only fire departments are examples of exempt provincial property tax, whereas fire departments provide an essential service to all residents of every municipality in New Brunswick, and not just those being served by the volunteer fire department, whereas water, stormwater management, wastewater are critical infrastructure that residents rely on for municipalities to provide for their health and well-being, be it resolved that the town of Sackville calls on UMB to meet with the province of New Brunswick in order to exempt more municipally-owned properties from paying provincial property taxes as follows. That beginning in 2020, all fire station properties be provincial property tax exempt, not only fully volunteer. That beginning in 2020, all water, stormwater, wastewater properties be exempt, tax exempt. That a review be undertaken to begin the process of making all properties owned by the municipality tax exempt from provincial property taxes in the future.
Moved by Councillor Tower, seconded by Deputy Mayor Aiken. We discussed this at fair length. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Worship. I had kind of raised this during the special council meeting in the fact that although we would agree to this, and maybe UMMB would agree to this as a whole, I'm wondering the reality with the province on this, and it's not just us that we have to think that they're looking at, it would be the entire province that would be affected here. So I think Mr. Beal had said something along the lines of $267,000 would be the gain for the town of Sackville. My concern is the fact that if the provincial government chose to go this route, then in turn, where is that money going to come from? The province is not in a very financial stable way right now, and if they agree, then they're going to go looking for that money elsewhere. They could look at it for further cutbacks. Might mean more downloading onto municipalities in regards to services. Heaven forbid they touch our hospital here. Those are all concerns I would have in pushing kind of this forward, looking for support from UMMB, and I'm kind of on the fence here as whether I would support us kind of leveraging this with the association. So,
thank you for that. Any other comments? We call for a question? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Please note Councillor Michaud was a nay. Motion is carried.
Motion number 2, whereas municipalities pay HST on all purchases made, whether for operational or capital purchases, And whereas on April 1st, 2004, the federal government granted municipalities a 100% rebate on the federal portion of HST paid, whereas municipalities continue to only receive a 57.14% rebate on provincial portions of the HST paid, and whereas on July 1st, 2016, the HST was increased from 13% to 15%, with provincial portion increasing from 8% to 10%. And whereas the non-rebatable portion of the HST has a significant annual impact on the municipality's operating and capital budget financing, be it resolved that the town of Sackville calls on UMB to meet with the province of New Brunswick ahead of the provincial budget for 2020-21 with the expectation that legislation be brought forward to provide municipalities in New Brunswick with a 100% rebate on the provincial portion of HST paid on goods and services.
Moved by Councillor Tower. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Aiken. Councillor Michaud.
I won't repeat word for word, but I have the same concern with this motion as well, and in regards to supporting it, I don't believe I can support this motion, so thank you.
Any other comments on the motion? Councillor Tower.
Thank you, Worship. Just as a follow-up, if UMB gets behind this, it would end up being a type of negotiation going on with the province, and they could come back with any one of those first four or two of them, which would be a lower cost transfer back to us, might even compensate back what they've been downloading. But at least it would become a negotiation effort where right now there is no negotiation, and so we have to have that voice going to them.
Question? Shall I call question? Question. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Councillor Michaud, did you?
Councillor Tower spoke because he put it in a different perspective for me, so.
Okay, thank you. I didn't want to miss your vote if you'd voted. Thank you. So that's unanimous? Okay, thank you. Motion is accepted. And Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm doing the next two for UMNB. Whereas on July 23rd, 2019, the FCM has called on all federal parties to support the permanent doubling of the gas tax transfer, and whereas doing so would have a great impact on municipalities' ability to meet the significant demands of the infrastructure deficit that are faced by all municipalities in Canada, and whereas one-time top-up was provided in 2019 that allowed municipalities to double their gas tax-related project funding for that year, which provided measurable benefits, and whereas a permanent doubling of this transfer would have an immediate and long-term impact on municipal assets, be it resolved that the town of Sackville calls on the UMNB to offer their support to the FCM on behalf of all New Brunswick municipalities, and they're requesting that all federal parties support the permanent doubling of the gas tax transfer during the upcoming 2019 federal election.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Aiken, seconded by Councillor Michaud. Question?
Question.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. Deputy Mayor.
Whereas local governments are responsible for many ongoing infrastructure decisions that involve GHG emissions, and whereas local governments are most open to direct citizen requests for meaningful efforts to mitigate climate change, including events such as student climate strikes, and whereas smaller towns and governments have little guidance on the scale or impact of GHG impacts from its decisions and actions, and whereas there is even less knowledge of effective mitigation measures to offset impacts of those unclear impacts, and whereas most GHG data exists at a much higher scales and it remains difficult to translate into local decisions, impacts, and effective mitigation measures. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the UMNB be mandated to apply for climate change funds from an appropriate agency to enter a contract with a qualified third-party organization to develop an initial guide/manual for smaller local governments that creates a practical basis for understanding the GHG magnitude associated with common local government decisions in New Brunswick, and of potential mitigation measures that can be considered in order to create effective offset of GHG emissions from those standard local government decisions and activities.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Aiken, seconded by Councillor Tower. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just wondering if I could get some clarity. I know that the municipality is already involved with EOS and a local emissions reduction plan. I think we've achieved milestone 3, or we're on milestone 3 right now. And I'm just kind of wondering how those two kind of blend together. If this is kind of redundant, or is this kind of over and above what work we're already completing with EOS? If there's that information to count, I appreciate it. Thanks.
So I'll speak to that. We raised this topic at Zone 2 meeting two times ago? 2 meetings ago, I think, and asked how were other small communities addressing these issues. A couple of them were also going into the partnership, and their suggestions to us were all things that we had already done. And yet, when we asked about this nature of how do you actually quantify impacts and mitigation, and how do you choose which elements you want, but he said, no, we don't do that. We can't do that. We don't have the capacity for that. So I reported back here, and we then went and took that to FCM. And as I noted in the FCM report, that I spoke to a variety of smaller towns across the country about the same questions and got exactly the same answers, that, yeah, we really struggle with this. It would be nice to have something aimed at a smaller town that was more practical. We basically do the same sorts of decisions: sewer, water, asphalt, planting trees, things like that. That there's fairly simple, common things at the local government level that it would be beneficial that we had some kind of quantitative guidance. I take your point that it fits nicely with the things we're doing with EOS and in the partnership, and it probably might help us get another one of those puzzles in this as we work through it. But what we also saw at FCM was that this was a national question. And so when I raised it at FCM with Climate Change Canada, they said, you should ask us for money for this through a regional organization and get a well-respected research group to work with that, so that we know the science is good and we know the local governance is good. So they actually said, please get somebody to ask us for money. So that's where this all came from. And you're right, I think it fits very, very well with our local partnerships with EOS, but I think it's a much bigger opportunity for local governments across the country to have a reference that makes a little more sense and is a little more practical. Does that answer? Yeah, thank you. Okay. Thanks for the question, because it's a long background to where we came from. So, any other questions for the motion? Question? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. We have Councillor Michaud. You have one more, I believe.
I do. Thank you, Worship. And first of all, I want to thank staff, Mr. Beal, Mr. Hanrahan, with assisting on this. I did have 2, but through my questions to the Deputy Mayor earlier, it kind of helped me understand where things are in regards to the formula and the conditional grant. But mine is regarding the designated highways, so I'll read it as is here. Whereas provincial funding for designated highway upgrades was cut in the 2019-2020 provincial budget from $25 million to $10 million. Whereas in 2018, municipalities were forced to start contributing a percentage of reconstruction and upgrade costs for these designated highways. Whereas designated highways are provincially owned and a provincial responsibility. Whereas even at $25 million in funding, municipalities had a difficult time in obtaining enough funding to undertake the needed upgrades to designated highways running through their municipality. Be it resolved that the town of Sackville calls on the UMMB to meet with the provincial representatives and request the designated highway funding be returned to funding levels equal to the previous budget year at $25 million, and that future provincial budgets includes CPI increases in funding levels at a minimum.
Moved by Councillor Michaud, seconded by Councillor Finney. Question? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. So just in context, what's happened in the past is staff will advance them to UMNB. They have a process of, because often there are similar ones from various places, they will sift through and consider which one is most clear. They would probably accept that one and put the other ones to the side, or if they have any questions, they'll call back and ask for some clarity on these, and the group at UMNB will decide on which ones go into the actual conference agenda. So we may hear from them on clarification questions. Okay? Thank you, Rich. Thank you all. That takes us to question period. Mr. Work.
So I'm wondering what happens now with the crosswalk across Main Street at Mount A. This has been an ongoing concern. It's the town's probably the busiest crosswalk. It was studied in 1999, again in 2000, again in 2006. Council has rejected the idea of putting a stoplight there, so what happens now?
I don't know what the answer to that will be. I think you're correct that it'll be an ongoing study, an ongoing relationship with Mount Allison, and that it will continue to be raised as to what the risk levels are, what the use is, and what those other options might be.
Thank you. I too am very concerned about the Brunswick News series on closed in-camera meetings in New Brunswick and what Brunswick News calls at least a culture of secrecy. And I'm wondering here in Sackville, we do have a very large number of in-camera meetings, and at one of them every month, the police have fairly, I observe from outside the doors there, fairly extensive discussions with council that we don't hear in public. We learned very little about policing in this town, in spite of the fact that the contract with the RCMP is a very expensive one. So, and I see that there's a question tonight about policing and whether there's backfill when police are doing other things here. And there was a suggestion from the CAO that perhaps council might want to ask about that. Well, will those questions be asked and answered in public? So I'm specifically asking about the in-camera sessions with the RCMP here and why there aren't more of them in public and why the public can't learn more about what council is hearing about the policing in this community.
Well, I think the first piece is that traditionally the RCMP did sit at the table for council meetings, at least when I was on council. And the recommendation from the RCMP was we can't talk about operational matters in this context. We have strategies of crime prevention, et cetera, dispatching, et cetera, that we don't want people to know where exactly we are and how we're doing that. And so what we had in the past was the RCMP say, we're not comfortable answering those questions here. We are more comfortable having that kind of a specific operational and tactical questions in camera. And that is the nature of that discussion. We try to put into the reports every month on quite a bit of detail as we can from the RCMP in terms of what is public information, but it's actually in that area that the RCMP has identified as material that they don't want the population to know how they conduct some of their business is what they wanted in camera.
I was
There's not much there.
Somewhat concerned, Your Worship, when I heard you say that the public gets the same information as council gets at the same time. That's not my experience here, nor is it the public's experience. Sitting out here beyond the charm circle, we, particularly at special council meetings, are not privy to documents that council is looking at. I'll give you an example. The August 6th meeting, for example, there was extensive discussion about installation of a stoplight at that crosswalk. 3 firms were mentioned as having submitted quotes. The firms were named, but only 2 of the quotes, the lowest and the highest bidder. Councillor Butcher raised an $80,000 figure for the highest bidder. To this day, I still do not know what those quotes were, and I had no documentation in front of me, the documentation that the councillors had, to look at in their discussion of that matter. Tonight, we hear this marketing, 2 firms submitted quotes on marketing. They're very good firms, Mr. Burke said at the special council meeting, but they were not named. And I don't know what firms they were until we hear them named tonight, but we still don't know what those firms submitted in terms of their marketing proposal. Council deferred a decision on that, but could easily, just as easily as in many other cases, have made the decision tonight without the public having an opportunity to know the basis of that decision. We still don't know, and I still don't know if the public and me will be given a copy of that submission from Portfolio Marketing. So when it comes to special council meetings especially, but also at these council meetings, we frequently, as members of the public, do not have access to the documents that you are reading and that you are discussing and that form the basis for your decisions. And so I consider many of those things, like special council meetings, to be partially closed meetings too, because there's not full information there available to the public on what is being discussed. So I'm wondering if you will consider providing, as you said, the information to the public, the same information as council gets at the same time, because that's not happening now.
Yeah, I take your point that we often have a debate about how best to evaluate submissions. And the evaluation of submissions we see as a staff function, that we expect our staff to be able to tell us what's the best of the quote, what's the best of the tender, what's the best of the competition, and for what reasons. And that is one that we expect our staff to bring forward at that point. That's not traditionally been an open public examination so that people weigh in opinions about which is they would prefer. We look to staff to provide that. So I'm not sure if you're asking that everything should be no longer flow through staff and should go through a public vetting when we get these proposals, or are you saying when the staff prepare a suggestion that you get the same information that we get from the staff?
Well, I don't see why, when in special council meetings, when you're discussing the package and you're discussing various proposals, that information is not made public so that we out here can know what you're talking about. When you're discussing 3 quotes, for instance, and only 2 of them are mentioned, sometimes only 1, we don't know what the other quotes were. I mean, you all do. You're all reading the background material. But out here, for us, we don't know what you're talking about. So the public is not getting the same information at the same time that you are. And that's very evident to me, having sat here since this new council took office in 2016. This is an ongoing irritant for me that I sit here in the dark as council discusses the pros and cons of things I know nothing about.
Any supplemental you'd like to put onto this?
I take your point. I mean, some of the information, typically the information that's prepared on the, what's referred to as the special meeting, the discussion group first Monday, quite often a lot of that information is still in progress, and therefore it's a working document and somewhat changing as it goes. So that's certainly been, in my understanding in the past, part of why it's not provided publicly, because it's still in the works, so to speak. The other thing is timing, you know, and is that it's to give council the opportunity of receiving that information to contemplate and think about it further, and then, you know, I would dare say that much of it should be public and made public at some point in time. That's something we could certainly review ourselves as staff and discuss further with council. But there are sometimes elements of, and to pick your, the comment on the proposals that get submitted by companies, they send in information that's relative to their own resumes, things of that nature. Sometimes they do want that, you know, some have no issue with it, some do have an issue with it. Sometimes there's things of intellectual property that they don't want released because they're competitors and looking to, you know, keep that to themselves as far as how they present their bids. One thing I've seen quite recently, after going through a number of projects, like, you know, some major ones of major significance, where companies submit bids and they strategize on where, if the town, for instance, is not going to go with the full project, where do they place the weight of the dollars on the components, because maybe we won't do component number C, and they feel that component number C won't be done, so they put less weight, dollar value to that, thinking that, good, I'll still get, you know, A and B. And so sometimes they don't want that type of information publicly released. So I'm generalizing, Bruce, as well. I mean, I'd have to kind of review through it further on it, but I guess that's where we're at, and I guess, Your Worship, all I can say is we can review it further. In terms of public tenders that open, whether it be an RFP, RFQ, or a tender, the two companies, I think that's probably something that we can and should make more public. It's a public opening when they're submitted, so I think from a staff perspective, we're just saying we created it. We think and believe we have expertise in certain areas. We know what the town's looking for. The town pays us well to do our job. We want to be able to, and I think certainly as CAO, you take the managers off the hook if you don't look for the recommendations around what they do. If we just receive the reports and submit them and say, here, council, go ahead, you review it and decide, why do I as a manager even, you know, all I am at that point is a courier. And I think we managers have expertise that we're paid for to provide. I have no problem at some point sharing that information, but I think it's to at least allow staff to do their job. And as I've said many times before, council can decide whatever they want, but they've at least heard what our recommendation is. But typically, I've seen reports presented by the managers that says we've got 3, 4, 5 bids, and the prices were this. I think that's public information, and we should be including that in our reports. So I think there are elements that we can probably improve on. There may be, and perhaps in my case, I see them so often, quite frankly, I guess I may lose track of what the public's receiving on the special meeting of council, and I'm thinking that it's flowing through. And perhaps, as I said, there's areas that we can come forth with the information more.
Well, I would urge you to do that, because that special meeting is the first chance the public gets to hear about many of these issues. And the decision will be made usually the following week at the regular council meeting. So for the public to hear the detail and then form an opinion and perhaps want to come here and ask questions about it and speak to it, it's that special meeting that is crucial as a first chance to hear what council is considering. And when full information is not available, then that impairs or hampers the ability of the public to know what is being discussed and what council may decide the following week.
And I guess the flip of that is true too. If staff don't have the opportunity to at least present the information first to council, and we send out the package on the Thursday before the special council meeting on the Monday, the discussion group type meeting, there's 3-4 days happen when it's public information, it's out there publicly, and the community's already forming attitudes and opinions on a lot of lack of information, and then talking to council and saying we should do this, you shouldn't do that, but they don't have all the facts. They haven't, and councilors don't even have the chance to ask questions to get that information. So I believe this process was set up such to at least enable council first to receive the information direct from the managers and have that first opportunity to ask questions, etc. Then there is a full week then to hear from the public and see what the public thinks. There's also the time then for council to reach out to whoever it is they think may have a concern on something to get their opinion. So
why come here then? Why should I come here to the special council meeting to listen to you discussing material that I can't see and that I'm in the dark about? Why should I come here, or any member of the public, to hear you discuss things that we have no knowledge of?
I think the information's presented at that time. The matter is presented, the background is presented, the questions are asked, answers are provided, so you don't have it in writing, but whatever is being presented is presented and is on tape audio and so you have the opportunity, as you've taken in the past, to send any emails to us requesting information, answers on things which we've responded to.
Sometimes the facts are given and sometimes they're not. Jamie Burke did not mention the 2 bidders on the marketing plan. I did not find out the 3 quotes on the traffic lights. So you're just sitting down here in the dark. It's very, very frustrating. And it came to mind because of the mayor saying the public gets the information when council gets it, when that is just not true.
I think, if I can, I think I did say that I have no problem. I think, once the RFQ comes in and a tender comes in, that may have been an oversight on our part not to mention those names of those companies and their bids.
Because that was certainly my understanding, was that the package we get on the Thursday is the same package that gets posted.
For the regular meeting.
Right.
Not for discussion.
Okay.
No.
Right. Councillor Evans, you wanted to?
That's the point I wanted to make, is that the mayor is correct, that for a regular meeting, the package is put online is the same package that we get. But for the discussion meeting, it's different. And I think the response is your concern, your point is taken, and I think we need to revisit this, because anything that we can reveal in public, I'm a big proponent of this. We are doing the public's business. But I also feel very strongly that staff have a right to speak candidly to council. And so they don't have to present to us in public. That's one thing. The other thing is, and this is more for my colleagues here, we've hired these people through the CAO to do a job. I don't think we have a right to review their work. We have a right to decide whether we keep them on staff or not. But we don't get to micromanagement because we're not management. Okay, we're not their bosses. They have a boss and he's sitting over here. He's our employee. So I don't get to say to a staff member, I want to see your work. What do you mean you did that? I want to evaluate that myself. That's not my job. That's not me not respecting my role. Okay, that's a separate issue. I agree. Anything we can, we should reveal to the public in a timely fashion. But the one reason why the motions aren't made public beforehand is because they may change. And we need an opportunity to be briefed by staff, as Phil has already said, before that information is out there in the public, because people will look at something often and they will take one bit of it and they will run with it. So the timing of it, I mean, everything we do becomes public after the fact. You're asking information before the fact, and anything we can do appropriately, I'm in favor of doing in that regard. But it doesn't involve everything in my mind.
I still haven't seen the marketing plan that you guys were reviewing and potentially voting on tonight.
Yeah, and as the CAO has already said, I don't think it's our job to review the marketing plan. That's staff's job. They make a recommendation and we decide. We don't have expertise in this field. Dwayne is regularly recommending technical stuff. I'm not an engineer. That's not my job. If I don't have confidence in staff, then we have a big problem. But if I do, my job is to provide oversight. Does this make sense to me? Is this consistent with the plan that we've done, the budget, the priorities that we have established? Do we think this is what the public wants? That's our job. It's not management.
So my question to you earlier was, are you basically saying that when there's a choice of bidders, that the public should have a say on the evaluation of those bids?
We should have the information that the council has on what the bids are and what the issues are you're discussing, rather than have you referring to the package. And sometimes when the treasurer gave his talk about the resolutions for the UMMB, it was a full exposition of what was in the package. And I could understand that. But other things, the details are left out.
And we didn't get a detailed analysis of the marketing plan in our package either, because that's what we were expecting staff to give us in terms of the recommendation, right? So.
Well, I urge you to consider the number of closed meetings you have, the number of in-camera meetings you have, the discussions of policing you have that is in camera, and also the amount of information that is not divulged during special council meetings when the public could benefit from knowing what it is that is on your agenda for the coming week.
We've taken your point, and I think we've got some good points to follow up on. I would say, again, that I don't necessarily agree with you on the policing, that there are protection items that the RCMP feel really strong about whether that should be public information, and compared to what we used to get versus what we can get, it's a much higher quality for us to understand what's going on in the policing. Councilor Bichon?
I guess for clarity point, it's information. I don't think it's anybody indicating that staff aren't capable. However, as a councillor, I know I need options and I need information in order to make a decision on behalf of the electorate who put me here. And there are times that I find that I have to go looking for more information. And there are times that I find that there is hesitation in providing that information. So also having a week to deliberate, to talk to people, to get feedback is a very limited amount of time. So I know there's been some suggestions. We're going to be looking at a procedural bylaw come fall, and I think that's really a great time to look at this and ways that we can improve things. We as human beings, and we as an organization, other organizations, we should be striving to continually improve ourselves. So all that's being said here, I think, is the fact that, the information, whatever information you can provide is reasonably, let's do that. The policing thing, I mean, that's another debate. I think there's some avenue there. I don't think we're exercising our position as a municipality with regards to the contract to the level it has been in regards to priorities, et cetera. And I think that's another subject matter that we should tackle maybe at a special council meeting down the road. But ultimately, it's our responsibility to be doing things better. And I thank Mr. Wark for bringing it forward and challenging us, because I like a challenge.
Councillor Tower.
Thank you, Your Worship. Going back to what Bruce has been talking about, we used to, when we had these information sessions, we were told how many bidders, and we would give them a list of what the dollar value was, so we could see that it's either, you know, really close on the bid or it's wild, out of this world. I think last week that Jamie, I believe he said he had 2 that he was looking at. And of course, when tonight he was coming forward with a name, I was looking for the other name so that people would have that information. But I agree that when it comes to the crosswalk, did we get 3? You know, I only have in my head just the 1 bid. And not to say that there weren't more bids, but that's all that stuck in my head. So whether it wasn't in my other information package, I don't know. But in the past, if we haven't had it, a lot of times we ask, you know, what were the other bids? Who else bid? So that information was going to the public, and I just think we have to find a way to get that type of information back out there. So as far as the other, the marketing stuff is like, you know, we didn't have any more than you did. So we go from there at that point.
CAO, please.
I think there's always opportunities to improve, and there's times when maybe we can work to do our jobs better. And I'm not suggesting we haven't been. I just, you know, there's an awful lot of information comes forward at a council meeting. We're sitting here now; it's almost 10:30, and I think there was almost 30 resolutions here tonight. And an awful lot of work goes into that in terms of trying to have that information ready. So, but I also know that when I first started here, I attended my first special council meeting and trying to get understand the lay of the land around here. And anyways, although it was a public meeting, there was no information, there was no record, there was no minutes, there was nothing on the website, there was no audio, and the videos did happen on the regular meeting. That's not the case today, and we put an awful lot of information on the website. And I sat through some of the early meetings and saw a petition get presented here to council. You won't find a record of that anywhere. That's not the case today. So if anyone wants to criticize that we're not open and transparent, go ahead, but I think that it's far from the actual fact and truth. And I know I've talked to a lot of municipal people across the country in terms of how they conduct their business and their processes. And I think our processes are well ahead of many. And there are no, you know, as you referred to, the secret meetings, but I guess it's a matter of how it gets interpreted. And I do admit that we can provide more information, and we'll take a look at that. But when we're behind closed doors for a session on HR or legal or property, as I've said before, you can't be talking about and getting direction from council to go out and buy a piece of property because you know it's needed for something, and to put that out there to the community and then go out and try and get the best price for the taxpayer. That does not work. And we've spoken of the RTIPA purposes of privacy of individuals, and you know, again, you know, individuals have privacy rights as well. That's the reason behind the RTIPA Act. So I think we've come a long way in making ourselves more open and transparent, and I'm still open to trying to find ways to improve. So,
Question period. You get 2 question periods. Nobody else does.
Yeah, and there is no question period at special council. So
gratitude. We have 2 at the regular meeting. We just take it, Bruce. I agree.
So you can't, so I can't ask about what the firms were.
I hear you.
I have to, you know.
Wait for the next session, then you can find it.
Any other questions from the floor?
I have a quick question. I know it's late. On the Renaissance Sackville stuff, what is the purpose of that funding? Is it for economic development? Is it, like, so what is the purpose of it, and what was the budget for it for this year? Like, is it set in a budget up front?
No, Renaissance has a historical mandate that was adjusted by council last year, that they wanted to see at least 50% going into economic development as opposed to community development. It had a mandate for both, and we asked them to put more effort into economic development. And the motion tonight was that they understood they would get their regular amount of funding at the beginning of the year, and we have not given that to them. So they had moved ahead with a variety of proposals that they had accepted, and then came to council and said, this is what we've made commitments for, and we have some other ones on the way. So council was asked to fulfill the commitments that they have made to economic development in the community based upon their processes that they understood they would be getting funding for.
So are there certain criteria in that funding? Because I'll tell you why. I was at the meeting when she did her presentation, and there was an amount of money that was allotted as a grant to a startup business, which was a specialty business, which is in direct competition with another specialty business. And at the time, she said, and this business has been in talks with this other business, and which is not true. I actually talked to the owner of the existing business. So I just thought, if the town is giving money to an organization who's giving grants to help a business start up in competition with another business that's already there, that's a specialized business, it just didn't seem right to me.
Yeah, the Renaissance was set up to do that better than having councillors decide on who gets grants, because that then becomes political. So it had been set up to have a corporation made of townspeople that would make some of those decisions and some of those investments. A couple of years ago, the Renaissance was coming in for getting council to approve every one of those, and they asked, could we give us an opportunity to take a grant approach where we can do that without having political oversight of every individual item that they wanted to invest in. That was provided for several years. They got a grant that they then managed, and what we're seeing now is council's looking at that, whether that's working, whether the mandate's still valid, what kind of products they're producing. So we're in the middle of looking at this.
Okay, so it's a separate corporation, but basically funded by the town.
They can apply for funds that we could not, which was, again, one of the reasons it was set up, was that they're supposed to go out and leverage that. We're not seeing as much as we used to see in that leveraging. No other questions? Okay. Move to adjourn by, who was that? Councillor Tyler? Seconded by Councillor Finney. All those in favor? Motion is